Umineko When They Cry is an 8-part visual novel that was made by 7th Expansion and released between the years 2007 and 2010. Welcome to a video series that is going to be me retelling the story as well as inserting my own thoughts and opinions on episode 1. This visual novel is not for everyone, especially just because of the sheer length of it. My first read-through of all 8 parts took a little over 100 hours to finally finish it. In fact, the entirety of it is literally longer than the Christian Bible. Some of my friends have even dubbed it the Bible 2 because of this fact. And so, I've decided to create this series to make Umineko a little bit more approachable for the average person. Welcome to episode 1. I hope you enjoyed. There's a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. Oh yeah, also, we start our story in a dimly lit room that looks out of some sort of vampire's castle or something, with candelabras, suits of armor, and tons of books. We are introduced to 3 characters, Kinzo Ushiromiya, Dr. Nanjo, and Genji, who is a servant of Kinzo. The doctor and Kinzo are talking about how he is close to death and he needs to start preparing his last will and testament. Meanwhile, Genji prepares some gross sickly sweet drink for Kinzo in the corner. We are later told this drink is absinthe. Apparently Kinzo is a big absinthe drinker because, I mean, what else would a insanely rich old man drink? The doctor urges Kinzo to make a will so that his relatives will know what to do with his fortune. This for some reason really angers him. He says, "I was born with nothing, I will die with nothing. There's nothing I wish to leave my foolish children." He is dead set on leaving nothing to his family, who he obviously despises. He also mentions some contract that he presumably made with some demons or something. He talks about how there will be no afterlife for him since his soul will be devoured. Kinzo seems like a completely senile old man who has lost his mind at this point, but he does mention one thing. He wishes to see the smiling face of Beatrice just one more time. Maybe Beatrice was his wife, or maybe the demon he made the contract with, or maybe even a figment of his imagination since he's talking about how she's in the room with him, invisible and mocking him. Could also be all the absinthe he's drinking, who knows. The final thing he says is he wishes to just see her smile one more time while calling out her name.
Beatrice! Beatrice!
We open up to our main character, Battler Ushiromiya, the 6-year estranged member of the Ushiromiya family. He and his family are waiting for a plane to arrive at the airport to take them to a boat that will take them to the Ushiromiya's private island, Rokenjima. Now, you may be thinking that this would just be a setup to introduce you to most of the main characters for this story, since most of the family is at the airport waiting to travel to the island. And you would be right, you're very smart. It is quite literally 30 minutes of introducing characters and waiting to get on a plane. I'm not kidding. I can tell you for a matter of fact that when you let the dialogue autoplay and let all the characters act out all the voice lines, it takes almost 30 minutes to actually get on the plane. The author truly spared no detail in telling you everything you need to know about every character and made sure that they all interacted with everyone else at the airport. This is a running theme of this visual novel. Dialogue scenes that take, well, as long as I suppose they would in real life, and you are going to hear every single mundane thing that these people have to say to each other, whether you like it or not. Anyways, I'm going to spare you some time and just introduce you to every major character that appears right now. First is Battler, the main character that you're going to be viewing the story through. He is, well, an interesting person. For the most part, he's pretty much what you would expect a teenage boy to be like, meaning he can be the literal worst sometimes. He has this running gag where he really wants to grope every girl around him, and well, that is regrettable to say the least. It is just so cringy. I don't understand why it was really pushed on us in the first part of episode 1, especially since Ryukishi obviously figured out that it was bad and pretty much stopped it altogether after the first episode. Truly a dark time for a character that I ultimately grew to love, but man, I really hated him at first. He's also just so stupid. So very stupid. Truly a buffoon. Ah, George. Truly the embodiment of a modern-day neckbeard. He's stilted as the very good boy of the cousins, with his dedication to getting good grades, being a good businessman, and just being a good son for his parents. He truly has not one fun thing about him. He is just an obedient and nice young gentleman who would always open a door for a fair maiden. I really don't like George, in case you couldn't tell. He really is just kind of boring and irritating. He's basically just a good Christian boy who wouldn't dare even look at his wife until after marriage. No, really, he has a girlfriend who, as far as I know, they've never even held hands. I guess that was kind of harsh, huh? Well, anyways, moving on. Hideyoshi is the father of George and husband to Eva Ushiromiya. One of the main things you need to know about him, especially if you don't speak Japanese and don't know the different dialects and accents, which is very possible since this video is in English, is that he speaks in this fake rural Japanese accent, and that is very striking to me. As a person who lives in the southern United States, I've actually experienced a similar thing in real life with people faking southern accents to earn respect from yeehaw types. Other than that, I guess there's not a lot to say about him right now. Other than that, he's a pretty nice guy and he really loves his wife. Get you a man like Hideyoshi is all I have to say, because he is a true bottom bitch. Probably literally, because there's no way Eva is not pegging him. Eva is the second-born child of Kinzo, the mother of George, and the wife of Hideyoshi. One of Eva's biggest early plot threads is that she basically scammed her way into being able to stay in the Ushiromiya family after marrying her husband. Normally for the Ushidomiyas, once a woman is married off, usually they are taken out of the family registry, but she found out a way to stay on by promising a child before her older brother, Kraus, would have one, hoping that somehow this would let her take over the family, and Hideyoshi was completely on board with this because he is a good man. Also, his family died in a tragedy, and he was just happy to have a chance at a family again. Yes, Eva is a girl boss through and through, and all I have to say is, slay queen, slay. Kirie is Rudolph's wife and Battler's stepmother. She married Rudolph, Battler's father, soon after Battler's mother, Asumu, died. And when I say soon, I mean like very soon. It turns out that she was pregnant at the same time Asumu died, and I think you already know that Rudolph was the baby daddy. So they had a shotgun wedding, and now Kirie is a part of the family. And yep, that's all I really have to say about Kirie. Oh, except for one thing. Or maybe I should say two things. What is with this character model? Seriously, I cannot comprehend what is going on with this outfit. Dress shirts don't hug your body like that. It just makes no sense. Oh yeah, also, if you think this sprite is bad, just take a look at the Steam version's model and just, wow. I'm gonna give you a minute just to really take this in and shame the horny motherfuckers that designed this. In fact, this is just a common theme of like a lot of the women characters in this visual novel. It's insane. Anyways. Now we get to talk about Battler's other parent, Rudolph. He's genuinely like the caricature of a deadbeat dad. He's also somehow a big hit with the ladies, or at least the game tells us he is, so yeah, I believe them. I mean, he is rich, so that helps him out quite a bit. That's probably the only way a 50-year-old man could get away with being as horny and perverted as he is all the time. However, the visual novel sets him up to be a pretty cool guy who fucks chicks and drives a sports car, so maybe it's just me that doesn't like him. I don't know. Ah, Rosa. Finally, it's come to this. Rosa is the youngest child of Kinzo and a mother to Maria. And keep in mind that I use the term mother very loosely. She is one of the biggest piece of shit parents I've ever seen, and you don't even know the half of it if you've only read episode 1. Rosa is just one of those characters that you love to hate. She has major temper problems, especially when it comes to her child Maria, basically because Maria has not become a fully grown, mature adult by the age of 9. Otherwise, when it doesn't come to Maria, she's pretty much a very nice person. Anyways, I will not go too in depth there, because for Rosa, showing is way more compelling than telling. Maria is the child of Rosa, and well, she is an interesting girl. According to Rosa, she has no friends that are her age, and this is in large part because of her weird magic obsession. She also has a very fun verbal tic that never ever, ever gets old. Before and after every sentence, she always goes, ooh, ooh, as well as repeating what everyone says to her instead of just responding to it herself. She also has a weird alter ego in the form of a witch personality. It can be pretty creepy as it comes out of nowhere and it never ceases to freak out the family members anytime they hear it. Maria serves to be a sympathetic character that the audience will tend to feel bad for because of her general neglect and abuse from her mother Rosa, as well as her unique personality that has rendered her with basically no friends. Now that the story has introduced us to the characters that are traveling to the island and let them all interact with each other a little bit, conveniently, the plane is ready to go. We also get a list of every character we've met so far one more time in the form of a flight attendant telling everyone where they're sitting. We also get a little show from Battler about how he starts panicking that there's no parachutes on the plane for everyone. It doesn't matter though, because the plane is about to leave and his dad shoves him on board. The plane lands at the airport in Najima, and immediately the whole family starts clowning on Battler. He was really freaked out by the plane ride since it was so bumpy, and of course everyone thought it was very funny for a big boy like him to be scared of a little plane ride. Everyone, that is, except for George, who of course was the one guy who said that it's not nice to laugh at somebody. He is, after all, a very responsible and likable young man. Just reminding you in case you forgot that fact from a few minutes ago. We then take a car ride to the boat docks where we are greeted by 2 more new characters. Jessica is the only child of Natsuhi and Kraus, who will be introduced in a little bit. She lives on the island with the rest of the head family. Her main character traits that are demonstrated almost immediately is that she has a very non-aristocratic way of behaving that drives her mother crazy. She's a slacker in school and overall just kind of a normal teenager. As far as being the heir to a billionaire family, she does not act like it at all. She is a huge fan of her extended family though, since she's stuck on the island for the majority of the time. Any family that comes to visit them makes her very excited, especially since she can act like herself for a little while around her cousins. When she meets Battler, Jessica is shocked by how much bigger Battler has gotten over the past 6 years. Battler then replies to her about how big her boobies have gotten and that he wants to rub them. Wow, reading that line made me want to die a little bit, not gonna lie. Jessica plays that off like that wasn't an incredibly weird thing to say and says there's no way she'd let him touch them. After that delightful exchange, Jessica then challenges Battler to an arm wrestle, which Battler completely destroys her at. He then proceeds to throw it in her fucking face and gloat about it. Battler's still holding a grudge about when he lost 6 years ago and he finally got his revenge. He then proceeds to make yet another comment about her chest, and Jessica responds in turn by asking Battler if his elephant son has gotten any bigger to go with the rest of him. Okay, so I just have to ask, do family members normally talk to each other like this? I have never once in my life had a conversation with my cousins about our genitals, but who knows, maybe that's just me. I really don't think it's just me though. Anyways, they talk about this even more in case you didn't get tired of it by now. George then inserts himself into the conversation to say that even Battler has his own weaknesses, hinting to that goofballery that happened on the plane earlier. Maria also chimes in to make fun of Battler by mimicking his cries of despair on the plane. This all leaves Jessica confused as to what they're even talking about, but soon she will find out on the upcoming boat ride. Then an old servant woman, Kumasawa, comes up from the boat to talk to the kids. Kumasawa is the first servant that we're introduced to. She is an elderly woman that has been serving the family for many years. She takes on the role of somewhat of a caretaker for both the children of the family and the servants. She is also very fond of her mackerel jokes that she makes all the time. Generally, her personality mainly revolves around being old, being empathetic, and being funny for the kids. Great gal, love her a lot. Kumasawa immediately starts in on Battler, making fun of him for trying to grab his cousin's boobies and tells him that he should feel her up too. Anyways, they start talking about Kumasawa's boobs for a while, and honestly, I'm just gonna skip it. I'm so tired of this at this point. At least Kumasawa is giving Battler what he deserves. At this point, the adults join in on the conversation and they remark how strange it is that Kumasawa would come to greet them. Usually she would say that her back problems are flaring up anytime someone would ask her to do anything. She tells them that she had some purchases to make anyways, so she figured she would come along. But this was really just a way to deflect Ava's sarcastic comment that she made. We also learned that Kumasawa should be pushing 80 as far as age goes, which I mean really, she shouldn't even have to be working at this old of an age, so cut the poor gal some slack for not wanting to do much of anything. Rosa then gives Kumasawa a gift of some tea that she bought for her after promising to do so over a year ago. This is just to show the reader that Rosa is a thoughtful and kind woman. This made Kumasawa really happy that Rosa would even go through the trouble for a servant. The whole family at the docks makes some conversation with each other about how much bigger all the kids have gotten, and that they sure do look a lot like their parents. You know, the exact kind of conversation that happens every time a family gets together. I come from a pretty big family, so this is all pretty normal stuff as far as I'm concerned. The parents and grandparents all love to talk about how much their kids have grown and all sorts of stupid shit like that. The family finally heads over to the boat, and on the way they drop a small piece of information to Battler that the boat captain has basically converted their boat into a speedboat. That means that even though he thought that the boat ride was going to be a peaceful and calm experience, it was not going to be anything like that. Battler tries to play it cool, like he's only scared of planes, not boats, but I think we all know what comes next. We set out on our boat ride to the island, and Battler realizes that maybe he is in fact scared of boats after all. Everyone on the boat takes turns clowning on him yet again, because he is scared to death of the boat going too fast. And as if we're on repeat, George, being the likable and responsible young man we all love, once again says it's not nice to make fun of someone in great peril like that, although that's kind of a jab at him as well. Rosa finally steps in to put him out of his misery and tells him that she's going to tell the boat captain to slow down. Poor Battler, he's just terrified of vehicles crashing and nobody will ever give him a break. Then, after the boat captain slows the boat down, Jessica gives us some information on her perspective of her parents and life on the island. According to her, all her parents care about is her getting good grades and being more ladylike, which, unfortunately for her, are two areas that she is greatly lacking as far as they're concerned. George chimes in to tell her that his parents used to be the same way too, but he's grateful to them for pushing him. Now he has a good job, and he couldn't be happier. Both Battler and Jessica acknowledge how much they look up to George, and I mean, who could blame them? He's the most likable and respectable guy we all know. More exposition happens. Battler divulges a small amount of information to us that he actually doesn't live at home with his family. He stopped living with them soon after his mother died. In fact, other than around his family, he actually doesn't even go by the Ushiromiya name. At least he did until his grandparents on his mother's side died while he was living with them, forcing him to move back with his dad. He also briefly mentions in narration to us a betrayal of his mother by his father, but he doesn't elaborate on it at all. Maria is confused by all this, only being a small child, and also she wasn't really paying that close of attention. Jessica plays it off by distracting her, saying that she can see the harbor from here. Kumasawa, who is the one who brought up Battler's living situation originally, apologizes for speaking out of turn, especially since it was obviously a sore subject for Battler. Changing the subject, we're then taught a little bit about the island that we're going to. Rokkenjima is an island off the coast of Japan. It is so tiny that most people don't even recognize it as a noteworthy place or even know that it exists. Furthermore, it is uninhabited except for the Ushidomiyas and the servants that live and work there. Basically, what you need to know is, the Ushidomiyas are extremely rich and way more wealthy than any person or group of people should be. And also, once they're on the island, they're basically isolated from the rest of the world. Battler makes sure to tell us after describing the island that even though he is extremely rich, he sure doesn't think of himself that way, and neither do any of his cousins. Okay, sure, whatever you say, buddy. I hope he doesn't go around saying that to normal people in his everyday life, because I can promise if some billionaire kid came up to me and said that, I would not be very happy. Anyways, that line of exposition is thankfully quickly thrown out by Battler, saying that this isn't really the time to get into all of that. As we approach the island, Maria notices that something has gone missing. George, of course, being a likable and respectable young man, jumps to her rescue, saying that he will help her look for whatever she's missing. However, George could not help her find what she was looking for, unfortunately. Maria had noticed that the shrine on the island's coast was gone. This was usually the first thing the family saw when they were coming up on the island, but it had just completely vanished within the past year. Battler says that maybe a wave washed it away, but then Kumasawa chimes in to say that a thunderbolt came down and struck the shrine, prophesizing misfortune. This was obviously Kumasawa up to her old tricks again, but this really freaked out Maria, causing her to repeat misfortune over and over again. Battler tries to calm her down, saying that if she keeps repeating that, misfortune really will strike. Maria just points up to the sky again and says misfortune is coming. The sky above had gotten darker and cloudier since they left the docks. A storm was coming soon. Battler then thinks to himself that he saw on the news that a typhoon was coming, and it was probably going to last the rest of the time that they were at the island. It may even cause the family to become trapped on the island for several days instead of the one day they were planning on staying. The cousins continued to be on edge until Hideyoshi came up from below the deck to unwittingly lighten the mood. He immediately starts in on Battler for making the captain go too slow again, and most everyone, including Battler, is happy to have the change of pace. Everyone except for Maria, who feels like people were ignoring her and not taking her seriously. George then bends down to Maria and says that there's nothing to be afraid of because they're all together, and there's nothing to be afraid of if they're all together. Battler and Jessica then both reiterate what George said to her, saying that since they're together, there's nothing to be afraid of. This seems to put Maria's mind at ease, and she repeats it one more time. As we dock at the island, we are greeted by yet another new character. Goda is a servant and the head chef of the Ushiromiya main household. Can you imagine being so rich that you have your own head chef of your own kitchen? Anyways, Goda used to be a professional chef at hotels and places like that before coming to the island. And anytime he gets a chance to show off his cooking prowess, he does so in spades. However, since Goda is one of the newest servants on the island, he is technically at the bottom of the servant ladder, so to speak, and will sometimes do things that make his fellow younger servants look bad just because he feels like he should be their superior. Jessica once again makes fun of Battler for making the boat captain slow down, this time for Goda. At this point, Battler and I are worried that we are never going to stop talking about it. Goda ignores that and then politely introduces himself to Battler. Battler makes a comment on how huge Goda is compared to him. Goda completely ignores that as well, and says that he's ecstatic to meet Battler, and basically just acts like a good boy while kissing his ass. Goda then helps all the other family members one by one out of the boat, and everyone comments on how well-mannered and polite Goda is compared to how brutish he looks. After getting to the steps, Battler notices that he hasn't heard any seagulls on the island yet, and that it was weird because usually there were tons of them around the island constantly making noise. And of course, now we start a 5-minute conversations about the seagulls because why not? Maria starts to get worried again. Of course, we don't miss an opportunity here to be reminded about how likable George is, because Battler makes fun of Jessica by saying that she grilled and ate the seagulls and that's why there are none on the island. George makes sure that Maria knows the real reason the seagulls are gone is because it's about to storm. Maria is really shaping up to be one of the most gullible children you'll ever see. She really will believe anything anybody tells her as long as it's convincing enough. Pretty soon, Rudolph and the others call out to the people on the beach telling them to hurry the fuck up as they are already walking up the windy steps to the mansion. After a short walk, they reach the guest house in the rose garden where they stand around and admire the flowers for a while. Everyone takes a turn talking about how beautiful the rose garden is, and it's basically the only thing they look forward to every year. All the adults also talk about how they wish they could have one that looks like this as well. Maria notices that one rose, however, is wilting prematurely. She feels bad for it since it must feel lonely around all the other roses that are flourishing. After she pouts for a while, George gets the idea that Maria should look after this rose and make sure that it doesn't die while she's here. So he puts a candy wrapper around the stem so that way Maria can find it easily later and give it water. The family continues to admire the flowers for a while until Hideyoshi notices another servant walking by, Kanon. Yet another servant at the mansion. Kanon is one of the child orphan servants that came to the Ushiromiya family to earn some money for a better life. He is very close with the other teenage servant at the mansion, Shannon, and even refers to her as his sister. Kanon is, well, he's a sad, depressed boy who constantly refers to himself as furniture. He says this because of his job as a servant, much to the dismay of just about everybody he talks to. He is also very serious and not a fan of much tomfoolery or any of that sort of thing. However, overall, he's a very good boy with a kind heart, and I love him as if he was my own child. When Kanon walks past everybody in the rose garden, he immediately becomes the center of the conversation, with Goto officially introducing him to Battler. We find out that Kanon has been working for the Ushiromiya family for about 3 years now, and that Jessica seems to be quite fond of him. Even saying that even though he seems like a very serious person, he is a kind-hearted person deep down. However, his unsociable nature tends to get him into trouble with some family members and servants, such as Goto. Over the course of episode 1, you really get the impression that Goto does not appreciate that Kanon is his superior, since he technically has been working there longer than Goto has. With Goto's background in restaurants and all that, I guess I could see why, but I mean, come on. Kanon is just too precious to hate. I mean, just look at him. Battler steps up to introduce himself to Kanon and asks him how old he is. And Kanon is just not having any of it. In fact, he even ponders whether he should give a response at all. This prompts Jessica to answer for him, presumably so Battler doesn't just completely dislike him right off the bat. After learning that Kanon is around his age, Battler asks him to drop all formalities and just call him Battler instead of Battler-sama. To which Kanon, of course, sullenly refuses, and this causes Jessica to have a look of panic in her eyes yet again. Goto bitches at him, saying that smiling is part of a servant's duty, a remark that Kanon basically brushes off and ignores. After this snide comment, Kanon says he has work to do and takes his wheelbarrow of gardening equipment about 2 feet, and then he runs into a pebble and the load of equipment scatters everywhere. Goto seems to be the one embarrassed though, and tells him to clean it up quickly. Kanon struggles to get the big heavy bags of fertilizer back into the wheelbarrow, but luckily our big strong boy Battler is there to help him get it back in. This only serves to embarrass Kanon even more that a family member had to help him do his job. Or maybe he was just surprised that one of the guests would even offer to help him in the first place. After they get all the equipment cleaned up, Kanon quickly leaves the scene, embarrassed about all the silliness that just happened. The family talks for a little bit about how they all actually really love Kanon and that Goto was being a prick for not helping him and just telling him to clean it up. Goto gives a fake apology but smiles really nice, so that way everybody still likes him. Finally, we get to the guest house where the family can put up their bags. The guest house is a huge building that's even bigger than Battler's house, and he was shocked that it was built just to house a couple guests a few times a year, and then remain vacant the rest of the time. Goto proceeds to show everyone to their rooms, and of course, unprompted, Battler thinks about how it's convenient that they are two persons' rooms so his parents can get freaky in private. Luckily, he at least doesn't say this out loud, saving him the embarrassment, but Kirie instinctively knows what Battler is thinking, and we get to have another tiresome conversation about it. Why can't we let it go just like one time? Seriously. After this fun interaction, Rudolph tells Battler that he better not be a little piece of shit in front of Kinzo because he does not like shenanigans. Then Rudolph asks Jessica how he's been feeling lately, to which Jessica says that he is as much of an ornery old man as always, and that even though he only has 3 months to live, he certainly doesn't act like it. This is quite concerning to all the family members who are all scared of Kinzo, despite being adults themselves. Luckily, Kinzo has basically shut himself off from the rest of the world, basically only allowing Genji to even have an audience with him. Jessica also mentions all the black magic he does in his study and how it stinks up the whole house, really just giving an even more foreboding vibe from him. It basically just makes him seem like an old wizard locked up in a tower or something. Luckily though, George is here to remind us that we should all not talk about our great leader Kinzo behind his back. After all, he did make the family very rich and powerful. Thank you, George. Everyone talks a little bit more about how scared they are of big bad Kinzo, and Jessica even says that he used to hit her with a wooden sword for punishment. George, of course, points out that Grandpa must just have really high hopes for Jessica because she's the family heir and all. Jessica replies that she really wishes she could just give the heirship to George because he is the best boy, and she doesn't even want it. Boy, I bet Ava's ears were ringing after she heard that comment. After everyone puts their things in their room, the gang finally decides to split up, with the adults heading to the mansion and the kids deciding to stay back and chat. After all, they have a lot of catching up to do. As the adults are leaving, George goes over to Kumasawa before she heads out the door and whispers something in her ear before running back to meet up with the rest of the cousins. Battler then starts to pester him about what was so secretive that he had to whisper to Kumasawa like that. Jessica and Maria soon joined in, bothering him also, although Jessica seemed to know something that we don't. Naturally, this turns into a fun tickle fight with George, Battler, and Maria, because why not? You know, like you all probably had with your cousins at the age of 18. During this intense torture, Jessica mentions that George probably wanted to say hi to one of the servants, Shannon. Battler and Maria still don't understand what that means though, so I guess it's back to the tickle fight. You know, at this point I'm sure you're probably thinking, Claire, why are you mentioning every single piece of nonsense that happens in this video when it is already so long? Couldn't you just skip over some of the inconsequential stuff like tickle fights? I mean, who even cares about that? Well, I do. I care about the tickle fights. Yeah, you know, it might get tiresome sometimes to have so much stupid shit to read through before you get to the good parts, but if you can't enjoy a good tickle fight, and if it doesn't make you smile just a little bit, then this visual novel is just not for you. After all, that is a lot of the charm. Also, more importantly, this is a mystery, and having all this crazy stuff happening kind of buries the lead for some of the actual mysteries that are happening. And also, it's just fun to make fun of the stupid shit that happens in this visual novel, even if sometimes it makes me want to claw my eyes out. Anyways, finally the torture ends, and Jessica mentions that George probably wants to go say hi to Shannon and see what Shannon is up to, still not giving them any real answers. However, she's all the way at the mansion getting lunch ready, but don't worry, Jessica reassures us that she will drop by to say hi sooner or later. Battler gets really excited that Shannon is still around and asks Jessica how she's doing. I guess because he wants to feel her up too. I mean, I can only assume that's why he would be so excited. Meanwhile, at the mansion, let's see what the rest of the gang is up to. The adults are in the dining hall, where Hideyoshi asks Natsuhi how her headache is doing. And now that we've mentioned Natsuhi, we get to introduce yet another new character. Natsuhi is the mother of Jessica and the wife to Kraus. Her defining characteristic is being very strict and uptight. Honestly, she's just completely anal about everything. And you know what? I think that is okay. She cares a great deal for her family, and she just wants the best for them. However, the fact that she is this way and literally cannot take a joke at all works against her, especially when talking to Ava, who just needles her relentlessly. Like you'll see, she is just completely brutal sometimes, and Natsuhi, bless her heart, just can't help but take it in the worst possible way. All in all though, I like Natsuhi. I think she's fun and she is genuinely caring. Or is she? Natsuhi responds to Hideyoshi telling her that her headaches have gotten much better recently, so good for her. Rosa then gives her a gift of tea that she says is good for headaches, once again showing her kindness and thoughtful nature. After Rosa gives her the tea, Ava then says that her headaches are going to get in the way of Jessica's studies and that she needs to pull herself together. She also says that Natsuhi is younger than her and that she really needs to get her act together. Classic Ava right there, really just being a bitch to Natsuhi for no reason. Of course, this shitty comment only serves to make Natsuhi's headache flare up again, although she tries to play it cool like Ava didn't hurt her feelings. Kitty A chimes in, trying to change the subject by saying that Battler also has exams this year and that Rudolph should really be trying to crack down on Battler to study harder too. Rudolph basically just says fuck it, I can't control that boy, and asks Hideyoshi how he made George such a good boy. Hideyoshi then just spouts off a bunch of stuff about how the key is to teach them why they need to study. Anyways, this conversation is boring, and I don't care about it, so let's just move on. Kitty A interjects to talk about how the tea that Rosa bought smells really good, and displays her knowledge about where the tea came from and that she wants to try it. Rosa agrees, and they start to get ready to prepare the tea, to which Natsuhi puts a quick stop, because the servant should be bringing out welcome tea at any point now. Of course, the fact that the guests had been waiting for tea this long that they would suggest to start preparing the tea themselves was a grave insult to Natsuhi's honor, and she starts to get pissed about the servants taking too long. Around this time, Shannon finally walks in with the tea cart ready to serve the guests. Shannon is yet another servant of the Ushiromiya family. She is very close with Kanon, her fellow servant, and generally all the servants care for her quite a bit. That is except for Gota, but he's a jealous hoe. She also likes George. She likes him a lot, if you catch my drift. However, much like Kanon, Shannon is also quite clumsy, and therefore falls into bad graces with Natsuhi quite a bit. She is overall very skittish around the family, as she is terrified of fucking up. but that just causes her to mess up even more. Beyond that, there isn't much to talk about Shannon for right now, so let's get right back to this scene in the dining room. When Shannon walks in, Natsuhi shoots a glare at her, letting her know that she fucked up. Although Shannon has no idea what she could have possibly messed up, so she gets very nervous. Hideyoshi greets her, saying how lovely she has gotten, to which Shannon does not even know how to respond. After stammering for a bit, Natsuhi tells her to just serve the fucking tea already. Ava decides to make the situation even worse by saying that the tea must already have been cold by now for how long they've been waiting, and surely her talking to Hideyoshi would not make it any colder. Shannon tries to play it off, reassuring her that the tea was still plenty hot. Natsuhi, already fed up, once again barks at her to set the table already. This time, Shannon finally complies. Kirei, trying to change the subject yet again, asks Shannon what kind of tea it was since it smelled so nice. Shannon, however, didn't know even that because she didn't actually prepare the tea. Gota did. Knowing that the tea would be late, Gota decided to pass the responsibility to Shannon for setting the table so that way he wouldn't get scolded about it. When Ava heard that Shannon didn't make the tea, she decides that she's going to say that she needs a silver spoon to check and see if the tea is poisoned. You know, because she's a gigantic bitch. Of course, Natsuhi couldn't let that slide, and that only made her more mad. Finally, Shannon finishes setting the table and fucking bolts out of there where she sees Cannon in the hallway. Cannon tries to comfort her by saying that she didn't do anything wrong, and she didn't. That's true. Apparently he had been watching the whole scene unfold from afar, and he said that Natsuhi and Ava are just cruel, but the biggest perpetrator of all was Gota, who wouldn't own up to his mistake that he had made. As they are talking, Genji, the head servant, walks up to them. Genji is the right-hand servant to Kinzo, and he is probably the most intimidating servant that you could imagine. He is straight up like butlers from old-timey mystery novels, and has the utmost diligence about his job at all times. He is always polite, but he never shows really any emotion. In fact, most people have never even seen him smile. Other than that, there isn't really much to say about him. He is just the perfect image of a confident servant. When Genji walks up, he tells Shannon that she needs to get back to the kitchen, but notices that there is something wrong, to which Shannon tries to play off and say that it wasn't that big of a deal. Presumably to not lose favor with Genji. Genji just closes his eyes, and he says if that is all, then go. And that concludes Chapter 2. We have basically seen every major character for Episode 1, and we are starting to see how the dynamics of these characters play out when they interact with each other. We are finally left with Kumasawa summing up what we have seen so far and reminding us that Natsuhi is under a lot of stress with this family conference fully underway now. We open back at the cousin's room in the guest house where the kids are catching up when Shannon comes in and announces that lunch is ready. Jessica tells her to come in and asks her if she remembers Battler since it's been 6 years since she last saw him. Of course, Shannon, being a servant of the family, remembers him, and even trembles as she asks Battler if he remembers her too. Battler then, of course, as he is insistent on doing, makes a comment about how big her boobs have gotten and that he wants to touch them. Shannon, being unsure what to do, just stands there and is full and well ready to let him grope her. Luckily, Jessica steps in and slaps the shit out of him. Battler then actually thanks her for stopping him because apparently he has no self-control and can't stop himself from doing perverse things. A likely story. Then, both Battler and Shannon make an agreement that if anyone ever tries that shit again, she will slap them and stop them from doing it. Shannon agrees in a playful way, saying that she can't do it unless it's an order because she is furniture. We then get a little backstory on Shannon, learning that she has been working for the Ushiromiya since she was 6 years old. That is an insanely young age to be working, to be honest. Also, she considers Cannon to be her little brother, and they love each other like siblings would. George interjects on the conversation and reminds everyone that they were told lunch is ready, and that they should go to the mansion. Thank you, George. So with that, we're finally going to head over to the mansion, to meet up with the rest of the family. As we arrive at the mansion, we are greeted by Genji, who makes sure to comment on what a nice young man Battler has become. He also mentions how he looks a lot like Kinzo did in his youth. Battler, of course, makes a joke that his grandfather must have been really popular with the ladies, if they look similar. Genji just completely ignores this, and then he says that he will accompany them to the dining room. As everyone is escorting to the dining hall, they come upon a huge imposing painting. This painting is new to Battler, and immediately he stops to stare at it. He asks Jessica about the painting, and we learn that it was commissioned to be painted by Kinzo about 2 years ago. Battler realizes that the woman in the painting is obviously not his late grandma because of the blonde hair and the fact that the lady in the picture doesn't even look Japanese. He asks just who is this lady in the painting. Maria is then the one to respond enthusiastically. George clarifies that she's talking about Beatrice, a witch. In fact, the witch of this island. Battler then remembers that the adults always used to tell him stories about the witch of the forest when he was little to keep him from getting lost on the uncultivated land of the island. Jessica chimes in to say that even though we all know that she's not real, apparently Kinzo thinks she is real, and that brainworm has been pulling him away from reality more and more, to where he can't even tell what's real and what's fake anymore. After staring at the painting for a while, George finally brings people back on task like a good boy, saying that everybody is waiting for them in the dining room. Everyone starts to head that way while Battler is still stuck in his own head, thinking about how Beatrice is the true ruler of Rokenjima. Or at least that's what his parents told him. Maria yells back at him to get the let out, and finally he joins the others as they're walking to the dining room. We enter the dining hall where the adults are already sitting in their proper seats. Apparently rich people have forced seating arrangements when at the dinner table, so in true Umineko fashion, as I'm sure you can expect right now, we're going to be told exactly where everybody's sitting and why. I'm sure you're all dying to know, so I'm just going to get right into it. So at the head of the table, we of course have Kinzo. He is the big important man after all. Then after that, we have all the adult children of the Ushiromiya family, followed by the grandchildren, and then finally the spouses of the adult children, sat in that order of the age of their spouses. So there you have it. This information is now in your brain forever. I hope you don't forget it. Kinzo is still yet to arrive, so the entire family is waiting on him before they can start eating, since he is the head of the household. Meanwhile, this is the first time Battler is seeing Natsuhi since arriving on the island, so they talk about how he's gotten to be such a big boy since the last time she saw him. Battler's relationship with Natsuhi is a bit lacking, since she really only talks to him in pleasantries and doesn't talk much with the kids at all. However, since their seating arrangements are right next to each other at the table, this is a nice time to catch up for him and his aunt. See, I told you it was going to be important. They had been waiting on Kinzo to show up for a while, and Battler is a little confused as to why he would be so late to lunch, since he remembered that Kinzo is very strict about time and attendance. Jessica tells him that lately grandfather has been off in his own world and he doesn't seem to care much at all about the family anymore. All he does is research his black magic and make the whole house stink super badly with his experiments. Hearing Jessica badmouth her grandfather, Natsuhi quickly scolds her about being respectful, and Jessica sticks her tongue out at her. Meanwhile, we shift our attention to the man of the hour himself, where he is locked in his office with Nanjo, Genji, and Kraus, the oldest of the children, beating on the door. Kinzo is the head of the family and the most likely to say really mean things to you for no reason other than disturbing his precious work. He hates every single one of his family members and only talks to a few of the servants. He's supposed to only have 3 months left to live because of some health condition, but that diagnosis was over a year ago and he has remained alive, surviving on anger and alcohol alone. Yep, it's that time again, time for another character introduction. Kraus, like I said, is the oldest of the Ushiромiyas other than Kinzo, and in my professional opinion, I don't like him. Man, the list of characters I don't like is really piling up. He is condescending to Natsuhi and constantly at war with the siblings because he is incompetent and they want to take advantage of him. And that's it. Yep, that's all I had to say about Kraus. Anyways, moving on. Nanjo is the convenient doctor on the island. Gee, I wonder if he will be important later. He is Kinzo's private physician and constantly gets roped into the family's problems. He generally just wants to stay out of the way and not cause any problems, but fat chance of that ever happening. Kraus was given the task of trying to get Kinzo to come down to the dining room for lunch, and he is not having any of it. Kinzo screams at him to keep that shit down. Kraus quickly gives up, deciding that he has done his due diligence as the oldest child. Nanjo gives it a try as well, making sure to remind him that his family only comes once a year and he should really try to go down and see them. But once again, Kinzo insults him and tells him to just get Genji. He only wants to see Genji. He then falls into another one of his screaming fits about Beatrice or something or another until Genji finally knocks on the door. Before he does though, Kraus calls his father an insane person and Nanjo says that's not a very nice thing to say. Which is true, it's not a nice thing to say. Kraus heads downstairs with Dr. Nanjo, having failed with the only task he had to do. Before they leave, Nanjo only tells Genji to avoid giving Kinzo alcohol at all costs. Genji finally enters the study and fixes Kinzo his usual drink of absinthe. In the study, Kinzo has old books and religious drawings strewn everywhere. He is deep into his research into the occult, and the absinthe only makes him more in tune with his magical studies. After Genji gives him his drink, Kinzo immediately calms down, and the two drink together and talk about how much Kinzo hates his family. He points out every single one of their faults and says that there is nobody in the family worthy of the inheritance of the Ushiromiya family. Genji just sits there and listens to him rant on like a good servant should. Kinzo says that all of his family sucks because of the curse of Beatrice, and he says that she is taking revenge on him, although for what he doesn't say. Kinzo then starts screaming again, saying that he will not let her escape his birdcage, and starts howling her name over and over yet again. After going into a coughing fit after yelling and getting calmed back down, he lays out his master plan. He says that he will bet his life in the demon's roulette, saying the inherent power of magic is the inherent risk of the bet. In order to obtain mighty power, one must face the risk of despair. After that, he just carries on again for a while, and then we go back to see the rest of the family finally starting lunch without him, and with that, the chapter ends. Every year, the Ushiromiya family meets on the first weekend of October for a family conference. During the conference, the adults discuss business and other shit that people don't really care about. After a super fancy lunch made by Goda, the kids set out to go to the beach, leaving the adults all alone together in the parlor. And now that the kids are gone, the adults can discuss the real matter at hand. Alright, so this is the point where we get to the heart of all the issues between the family. To be honest, it's not my favorite scene in the episode, so to spare you the usual play-by-play of everything that happens, I'm just going to give you the cliff notes of the financial problems of the Ushidomiyas and how the adults interact with each other in this scene. Okay, so here's basically what's going on with the Ushiromiya inheritance. Since grandfather is going to die in the near future, all the children are fighting to make sure they get their fair share of the inheritance. Do that, they try to extort Kraus for money from Kinzo's gold that definitely exists, for sure. This is because they all have businesses that are suffering right now and they need money from Kinzo to help them from going under. During their quote-unquote friendly chat, the siblings all gang up on Kraus and make sure that it seems like he is stealing money from their father in order to make him panic and give them some money. However, Kraus catches on to this and basically turns it around on them by showing that he knows all about their financial struggles and ends up saying that he's not going to give them anything. And that's it. That is the entire inheritance problem summed up in, wow, a minute. Nice. Other key things that happen here are yet another fight between Eva and Natsuhi that ends with Kraus telling Natsuhi she has to leave. Afterwards, Kumasawa does some exposition to no one about the relationship between Eva and Natsuhi. She says that Natsuhi could not give birth for the first few years of her marriage with Kraus, and that made Kinzo very upset with her. During that time, Eva got married to Hideyoshi and convinced Kinzo to let him go onto their family register. She then gave birth to George in an attempt to seize the heirship. However, Natsuhi gave birth to Jessica years later, and this is where we are today. Basically, Eva has been trying to take advantage of Natsuhi for the entire time she's been in the family, and constantly harasses her every time they meet in real life. Meanwhile, on the beach, the children are discussing the portrait epitaph together. Battler, who has never seen it before, is intent on trying to solve it while they play around on the beach. Luckily, Maria had written it down in her notebook that she carries around with her everywhere so they could study it thoroughly. The first part of the epitaph describes where to find a key. It says, "Behold the sweet fish river running through my beloved hometown. If you seek the golden land, follow the river and seek the key. Downstream you will find a village. In this village, seek the shore of which the two will speak. There the key to the golden land sleeps. Whosoever finds the key should follow these directions to the golden land." Everyone except for Battler had already tried to solve the epitaph several times and couldn't even come close. It's just too hard. The only exception being Shannon, who said to everyone that she truly doesn't have any desire for money or anything like that. After reaching the same dead end they'd reached a dozen times before though, they found that maybe Battler doesn't have some special insight into solving it after all. As far as what this part of the epitaph means, it gets into a bunch of Japanese towns and wordplay, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know anything about Japanese geography, and I'm really afraid of butchering what they are talking about, so if you want to know what all is said, just read the text that was on the screen for this scene. I'm saying this for the people who really just like listening to videos instead of actively watching. Either way, I promise that they for sure got nowhere with it, and that no useful information for solving it yourself is presented. After trying to figure out the starting point and failing, Shannon brings up that the next part of the epitaph gets very dark. On the first twilight, offer the 6 chosen by the key as sacrifices. On the second twilight, tear apart the 2 who are close. On the fourth twilight, gouge the head and kill. On the fifth twilight, gouge the chest and kill. On the sixth twilight, gouge the belly and kill. On the seventh twilight, gouge the knee and kill. On the eighth twilight, gouge the leg and kill. And then on the ninth twilight, the witch will revive and none shall be left alive. Maria adds that these are sacrifices to revive Beatrice. And then Shannon agrees, saying that on the ninth twilight, everyone will die no matter what. After that is the 10th and final twilight. At Journey's End, you shall attain to the power of the Golden Land's treasures once and for the last time. Jessica and Battler then discuss what happens after the 10th and final twilight for about a second, and then start laughing at the idea of a witch actually existing. Of course, Maria is now pissed at them once again for making fun of her best friend, the witch. She starts screaming at them because they're stupid, and Jessica quickly apologizes, saying that she was just joking while sticking her tongue out at her. Bitch. After that half-ass apology, Maria shows them all of her pictures of the witch that she drew. She also tells them about how nice and beautiful the witch is and that they always have fun doing magic with each other. According to Battler's internal monologue, as she has been getting older, witches were the only concept that could embody the magical dream that saved her from her otherwise incredibly dull everyday life. And she didn't want these idiots to ruin that for her by trying to pick apart the epitaph like it was a puzzle and not a magical ceremony. Seeing that Maria is getting upset, Shannon cuts in to tell her about a ghost story that the servants have kept between them. According to her, at night the witch Beatrice roams the halls of the mansion, unlocking and locking doors and windows, and turning on lights that were supposed to be turned off. Jessica chimes in, saying that anytime that she misplaces her backpack or something that she loses, she blames the witch Beatrice for stealing it and then moving it to a different location. After hearing this story, Maria becomes happy again, proudly exclaiming that Beatrice exists. This time, everyone just agrees with her to save the trouble. One last thing that Shannon brings up is one time one of the servants of the mansion actually spotted Beatrice at night and followed her. They ended up getting really hurt that night and quit their job at the mansion. Shannon reassures everyone, though, that as long as you respect her as the master of the night in the mansion, nothing bad will happen to you. After this, Maria feels more encouraged than ever and pulls out her diary, or magic grimoire as she would call it. She shows Battler and the others her magical circles and other scribbles about magic that she wrote down. Then she gives both him and Jessica scorpion charms to ward off against magic attacks. She says that with these, they don't even need to worry about Beatrice, since they were obviously very scared. Maria and Shannon continue to talk about Beatrice and magic and stuff like that for a while. Pretty soon though, George feels a drop of water on his forehead, meaning that it's starting to rain. The wind had also started to pick up, so it became obvious that the storm was about to hit. With that, everyone decided to head back to the mansion before it started pouring. On the way back to the guest house, the kids decide to look at the roses in the rose garden again, because it may be the last chance they have to do so if the storm is as bad as the TV says it will be. Right then, Maria remembers to go check on a rose that she marked earlier to see if it's still doing okay. However, when she goes to look for it, she can't find it anywhere. They look for it for a little bit, but the cousins quickly give up searching for it, assuming that it must have blown off in the wind since it was already pretty sickly. Maria refuses to give up looking for it though. She insists that it must still be here and starts to get really worked up, and even starts screaming that it's still here and that they need to keep looking. At this point, nobody knew what to do, so they just kept looking for a rose to make her happy a little bit longer. Starting to get really concerned, Battler turns to Jessica and basically says what is wrong with this girl. Jessica says that Maria just gets this way sometimes, and she won't give up on something no matter what if she sets her minds to doing it, even if there's no chance to get what she wants. Just then, Rosa walks up to them in the rose garden, and Maria calls out to her to help search. Battler explains the situation to Rosa, which only serves to make Maria even more upset. She insists that the rose has to be here. However, Rosa ignores what Maria said and starts getting really mad at her for going ooh over and over again. She tells Maria to shut up and she will look for it. This catches Battler off guard since it was very out of character for Rosa to be so harsh. Rosa is usually a kind and thoughtful person, so this side of her was very new to Battler. Rosa soon gives up though, because she can tell as well as anyone that the rose is gone. This makes Maria scream at her yet again, and this time Rosa snaps.
ここにはそのバラはないわよ。他の場所の間違いじゃない。これだけたくさんのバラがあるんだから。違うの。ここにあるの。ママも信じてくれない。ちゃんと信じて探してるでしょ。でもないじゃない。でもここなの。ここにあるのにないの。じゃあ誰かが抜いちゃったんでしょ。とにかくその言うのやめなさい。マリアのバラ抜いたの誰。返してそんなの知らないわよ。やめなさい。その言うのやめなさい。その変な口癖をやめなさいって言ってるでしょ。だからクラスの子たちにもバカにされるんでしょうが、いい加減にしなさい。
ローザおばさん、まあその小さい子供のことですし、そんなマジになんなくても。
ごめんね。バトラ君たちはちょっとお部屋に戻っててくれる？おばさんはマリアとちょっと話があるの。誰もマリアのバラを信じてくれない。ここにあったのに。探してここなの。ここにあったの。でもないじゃない。なら他の場所の勘違いでしょ。ここなの。絶対にここなの。じゃあなくなっちゃったのよ。諦めなさい。どうしてマリアのバラがなくなっちゃうの。どうして知らないわよ、そんなの。だからその言うのをやめなさい。
ローザおばさん、いくら娘でも暴力はいけねっすよ。
バトラ君は変に思わないの？あなたの学校にうなってる女の子なんている？
いや、まあさすがに高校には。でも小学生ならそういう言うのも可愛いじゃないっすか。
可愛い？言うのが可愛い？可愛いって？バカ言ってんじゃないわよ。マリアがいくつか知ってる？9歳よ。小学4年生なのよ。幼稚園児じゃないのよ。それなのにまだクラスで言ってるのよ。わかる？この子クラスでなんて言っていじめられてるか知ってるの？この変な口癖のせいで未だに友達の一人もいないのよ。無責任にマリアのこと可愛いとか言って現実から目をそらさないで、この子の将来のことをもっともっと真剣に考えて。 やめろって言ってんでしょ。
昔はローザおばさんもマリアちゃんの幼児言葉の一つだくらいにしか思わなかったんだけど、小学校の中学年になっても治らないのを最近はだいぶ気にしてて。
別にどういう言葉遣いをしようと関係ねえだろ。
そのまま社会人にはなれないよ。だから見ていて気持ちのいい光景ではないけれど、これはおばさんたち親子の問題なんだよ。
まあ私もこの言葉遣いのせいでよくおふくろに怒られるけどよ。
バトラ君だって小さい頃悪い癖が治らなくて怒られたことがあったんじゃないかい？
まあ一つや二つは。授業参観の日に人前でずっと怒られてた時は恥ずかしくてたまらなかったぜ。
じゃあ今のマリアちゃんたちの気持ちはわかるよね。僕たちにここにいてほしいとは思わないんじゃないかな。ジェシカちゃんにもわかるよね。
怒られてるところを誰かに見られてえとは思わないぜ。
行こう。ゲストハウスへ戻ろう。そしてマリアちゃんが戻ってきたら何事もなかったかのように迎えてあげようよ。それが一番じゃないかい。
Up in Kinzo's gamer lair, he's staring out at what just happened and he says, "You're late, Beatrice." And then I wrote in parentheses, important. So yeah, I guess this is going to be important very soon. In parentheses. Now that the island is cut off from the world by the storm and all the pieces are in place, it's time to start the roulette of fate. Total of 18 people on the island, 13 sacrifices are to be made. To signify the start of the game, he throws out his gold head of the family ring out into the storm, ceremoniously giving up the headship of the family. Thunder strikes as he does it because it's ominous, so why not? And with that, chapter 6 is over. Back at the guest house, Battler, Jessica, and George are talking about how lucky it is that it's raining so they won't have to go to school tomorrow, since the boat won't come by to take them back to the mainland. At that moment, Cannon came by the guest house to tell the kids that it's time for dinner and they need to head to the mansion again. Before they leave though, Cannon looks into the empty room across the hall and asks where Maria is. They all assume that she must have gone to the mansion with her mother after that incident in the Rose Garden. Meanwhile, though, at the mansion, Rosa had decided to take a little nap after a hard day of child abuse when she was woken by Genji giving her a blanket. After noticing that the rain had really started coming down now and the storm is in full swing, she instantly goes into a panic, asking Genji where Maria is. He of course has no idea where she is, because he thought that she went back to the guest house. Just then in Rosa's mind, she remembers that she told her daughter to stay there looking for her rose forever, because she was done helping. And she knows if she told Maria to do something like that, she would definitely do it until someone made her stop. Realizing that she had done something very bad, she runs out of the mansion to the Rose Garden, where she and the kids from the guest house meet up. After searching for a while, Battler finally finds her crouching in the same place they left her. Luckily, she had an umbrella to shield her from the brunt of the rain and wind, but she was still muddy and soaking wet. Battler was in shock. He was told that Maria would continue to look for something forever if she was told her to, but he couldn't actually believe she would sit out here in this horrible storm still looking for this stupid rose. Rosa finally convinces her to stop looking for it today and that they will look for it again later. Maria, tired and destitute from the rain, absentmindedly agrees. Rosa then apologizes, bawling and in tears for being such a bad mother and leaving her out here like this. George, being the voice of reason, suggests that we all get out of the rain and go back to the mansion. On their way back, Jessica remarks that Maria was really smart to pack an umbrella. But then Maria turns to her and says that she didn't bring one herself. Instead, she borrowed one from Beatrice. Rosa, pretending like maybe she didn't hear that, asks again where she got the umbrella from. Maria once again happily responds. This makes Rosa give up on asking her. After all, she can just ask the family members at dinner who gave it to her. Meanwhile, up at the study, Krause is once again trying to convince his father to come down for dinner. Otherwise, he may not even see his family this year. I'll save you the back and forth, though. He's not coming, and Kraus is actually kind of relieved. However, Grandpa is no longer flying off the handle all the time. He will only leave his study if Beatrice is resurrected or if he is chosen as one of the sacrifices. Wait, what? Anyways, Kraus goes back down to the dining hall and says that Father is not coming, and yeah, no one's surprised and no one even really cares. Then Rosa asks the people in the room who gave Maria an umbrella in the rose garden so she can thank them. All of the adult Ushiromias say that they had no chance to do it since they were still having their friendly chat in the mansion. Shannon and Kumasawa also didn't do it because they were preparing rooms in the mansion for the guests to stay if they didn't want to walk back out in the rain. However, they say that Cannon might have done it on the way to the guest house. Cannon did not do it though because he was just trying to get to the guest house as fast as possible in the rain. Of course, we know that Maria didn't pack the umbrella herself because she already said that. And none of the kids who were at the guest house did it since they all thought that Maria was at the mansion. Goto was preparing dinner this whole time, so there's no way that he could have done it. Oh yeah, there's also Natsuhi who left during the siblings' friendly chat because Ava is a cold bitch and made her leave. However, she says that she didn't do it since she was resting from her headache in her room. Nanjo and Kinzo were up in the gamer den playing chess ever since lunchtime, so neither of them could have done it. Not to mention the fact that Kinzo never would have done that in the first place. He doesn't even like Maria. And finally, later Genji is asked if he was the one who gave her the umbrella, but he says he didn't do it either. Finally, Rudolph just suggests that maybe they should just ask the person who was given the umbrella. But I think we all know how that is going to go. Maria tells everyone proudly that it was Beatrice who gave her the umbrella, and boy, Kraus got a good laugh out of that one. Eventually, though, after no one admits to actually giving her the umbrella, there's a mysterious air in the room. After all, maybe it was the witch from the painting. Dinner is served, and it's a beautiful gourmet meal, fitting of an absurdly rich family. But everyone seems to not even care about it. They are all still weirded out by the umbrella incident, and very confused as to what exactly is going on. Goto tried to liven up the dinner party with fun little jokes and stuff so that way all of his hard work wasn't just a complete waste, but it was no use. No one gave a fuck about that dinner, only the umbrella. Finally, tea and coffee were served, meaning that dinner is over. Maria, who had been anxiously waiting, asked George to be sure, and when he told her that it was in fact over, she reached into her handbag and pulled out a letter. This was not just any letter though, it was a special letter, complete with the Ushiromiya family crest on it. There was also a wax seal that could only have been made by the family head's ring. This was a letter from Kinzo, proven by the fact that the wax seal was done with his own ring, which he would never take off of his finger. So that could mean only one thing. Whatever was in that letter was a message from Kinzo himself. Hideyoshi tries to take it from Maria so he can inspect it. Maria freaks out and tells him that only she is allowed to read the letter, and he cannot touch it. Kirie asks her where she got the letter from, and of course I think we all know what she is gonna say. She got this letter from Beatrice. She gave it to her when she gave her the umbrella and was told to read it for everyone after dinner was over. After the adults argue over the legitimacy of the letter for a while, they agree to go ahead and let Maria read what's inside. Finally, she opens the letter and this is what it says.
Welcome to Rekenjima, members of the Ushiromiya family. I am Beatrice, the alchemist for this family, employed by Kinzo himself. I have served him for many years in accordance with our contract, but on this day, Kinzo has announced the final suspension of that contract. Therefore, I ask that you acknowledge my resignation from the position of family alchemist from this day forth. And now, there is one part of the contract that must be explained to all present. I, Beatrice, lent Kinzo a vast quantity of gold under certain terms. One of those terms specifies that all the gold is to be returned to me upon the termination of the contract. Furthermore, I am to receive everything of the Ushiromiya family as interest. After hearing this, you might feel as though Kinzo has been savagely ruthless. However, Kinzo did append a special clause to the contract so that you would have a chance to preserve your wealth and honor. If and only if that special clause is fulfilled, I will lose my rights to the gold and the interest for all eternity. Special clause. Beatrice retains the right to collect the gold and accumulated interest upon the termination of the contract. However, if someone is able to discover the hidden gold of this contract, Beatrice must abandon these rights for all time. The collection of the interest will proceed shortly, but if any one of you fulfills the terms of this special clause, I shall return everything, including the portion that has already been collected. Furthermore, as the first step in this collection of Kinzo's debt, I have taken possession of the Ushiromiya family head's ring, which signifies the passage of the Ushiromiya family headship from one individual to another. I ask that you confirm this for yourselves by examining the imprint on the wax seal. Kinzo has already publicly displayed the location of the hidden gold within the epitaph under my portrait. The rules apply equally to all who can read the epitaph. If you discover the gold, I shall return everything to you. Tonight, I ask that you enjoy your battle of wits with Kinzo to the fullest. I sincerely pray that this night will be both intellectual and elegant.
ゲットに落ちるのか、ノワールか、ルージュか、それとも親の総取りか。さあ始めるがいい、ベアトリーチェ。私が再びお前に奇跡の力というものを見せてやる。
Now disillusioned with their parents for starting to fight over the inheritance again because of Beatrice's letter, the children decide to go back to the guest house. They also decided after seeing that pathetic display that no matter what, they would never end up like their parents when they get older, always bickering and fighting over money. Considering all the secret agreements the adults have been making about the inheritance over the years, this Beatrice showing up puts a huge wrench in their plans. All the adults were hounding poor Maria about who exactly it was that gave her that letter, but of course we all know that by now, Maria wouldn't tell them shit. Kirie, though, had a different theory. She asked Battler if he thinks that Beatrice really exists. Her theory is that whoever is claiming to be Beatrice in that letter is not another person that we haven't met on the island, but someone we have known this whole time. I mean, how could she be an unknown person? Their boat was the only one that showed up today, and it's been storming, so we know that another boat would not have shown up, and no one would have been on this island other than the people that were working here, live here, or showed up on the boat today. Right? So the only assumption one could make is that this Beatrice must be one of the 18 people that we know is here. Right? There's no way that anyone else could be here, and if there is, where are they? How have we not seen them yet? And considering that it is Beatrice, if she was a 19th person, she would be obviously an honored guest. So why would she give her letter to Maria in secret instead of just showing up and reading it herself? However, this theory that Kirie has is just a theory. After all, they can't prove there isn't actually a 19th person on this island. Kirie was just using some of her world-famous chess theory, assuming that if your opponent wanted you to think that there was a 19th person, that would mean that there was actually 18 people on the island. However, I guess you could imagine that they are trying to trick you about that too, and there's actually 19 people, and they just wanted to make you think that there was 18 people until they made a big entrance. And really that logic hole just keeps on going on and on like that forever. The theory that there is another person on this island that we don't know about is a devil's proof. And if you think that's the last time you're going to hear that term, then I have some news for you. So anyways, I'll go ahead and define what that is in case you don't know, since it's going to be coming up a lot. Devil's proof. A theory that says you cannot prove that something doesn't exist just because you haven't witnessed it yourself. Basically, it is impossible to prove a negative. I know that you, my dear viewer, are very smart and beautiful and don't really need me to explain these things to you, but I'm going to anyways for my own benefit. So, if we're going to figure out just how many people are on this island, we might have to think about how much we are being deceived, or if we're being deceived at all. Basically, there's either someone hiding on this island right now with some agenda, or one of the 18 people that we know are on this island trying to create some chaos, saying the witch is here to collect her interest. Either way, considering how mean everyone has been to Maria up to this point, especially the adults, it's doubtful that she would tell anyone the truth. Kirie tells Battler to try and cheer her up, and then try asking again later. Just then, Rudolph walks up to them and tells Kirie that the rest of the adults are taking a break from their friendly chat. He says at this rate, especially with the whole letter situation, they will be bickering all night. He then asks what Battler is going to do while they're having their conference, and Battler says he and the kids are going to go back to the guest house away from all this negativity. After all, this is supposed to be just a vacation for him, and it's the first time he's seen his cousins in 6 years. He wants to make the most of it. Right before he leaves though, Rudolph says something that really bothers him. Rudolph says that he wants to have a little talk as a family, with just him and Kirie. Apparently, it's something very important. And then he says this. When he said this, Battler noticed that he looked extremely frail and unsure of himself, a trait that he never sees in his father, so this threw him off quite a bit. Kirie agreed that it was weird. After saying this, Rudolph walks away defeated. Kitty figures that he wants her to follow him and talk about whatever is going on. Before she leaves though, Battler thanks her for cheering him up a little bit with the mystery that she's posed him. Meanwhile, in one of the halls of the mansion, Natsuhi is thinking about the events that have just transpired. She was also worried about how this letter from Beatrice would shake up the inheritance problem. Before this, the other adults really had no chance of inheriting the whole family. But now this Beatrice seems to want to shake everything up. She naturally thinks that Beatrice is obviously not an extra 19th person. Obviously, this message from the witch was a plant by Kinzo himself, proven by the fact that he acted completely neutral about its existence when questioned and ignored claims that he had given up his ring. He must want Kraus to not automatically obtain the headship after his death, or at least keep all the adult siblings on their toes for life. Because, after all, if someone could find the gold, that means that they would inherit the entire family. All they have to do is find the gold themselves. But it's not as though the gold actually exists, right? I mean, there's literally no proof that it exists other than the legend that Kinzo found 10 tons of gold and rebuilt the Ushiromiya family after its collapse. As far as anyone in the real world is concerned, there's no way there's actually 10 tons of gold hidden somewhere that someone could just find and become the head of the Ushiromiya family. Right? Anyways, Kraus takes Natsuhi to a hallway in front of a locked room. A room that Natsuhi has never been allowed to enter before. Kraus had told her that there's something in there that she needs to see, and that will clear everything up. They both walk into the room and shut the door, and when he turns on the lights, Natsuhi sees that. The gold that everyone has been arguing for, and that no one even knew was real. There was proof of it, sitting right on the table in this room. A gold ingot with the Ushiromiya family crest, the one-winged eagle, stamped on it. This was the gold ingot that Kinzo used to convince his investors that his gold was entirely real. Kraus had painstakingly tracked it down and brought it back to the mansion. The fact that Kinzo had been willing to give it up freely was basically proof that he had much more at his disposal. And it also meant that if somebody really did find the rest of this gold, everything would be over, as was told by the witch in the letter. Of course, the fact that Kraus never told Natsuhi about this naturally made her very pissed. Felt that he didn't trust her with anything, and to that, Kraus, being an idiot, said that it's not that he didn't trust her, it's just that there was no reason to tell her. Which, man, how do you not know that that is even worse? Kraus continues to talk down to her until she just gets so upset that she leaves. Of course, it's only understandable that she would get extremely mad. Having been forced into this family with an arranged marriage and then never receiving a single ounce of respect the whole time she's lived on the island, this entire time she's just been treated like someone who has only lived to give birth to children for this family. And when she couldn't even do that for the first few years of her marriage, she was treated even worse, especially by that bitch Ava. Even her own daughter probably despises her, considering all Natsuhi ever does is get onto her for every little thing that she does. Natsuhi was feeling truly shitty in this moment. Then, as if on cue, Jessica walks up to her in the hallway. Jessica could tell that her mother was feeling very vulnerable right now, and to make her feel a little bit better, she gave her the scorpion charm that Maria gave her earlier. She tells her mother to hang it off of her doorknob and it'll ward off evil, or at least that's what Maria said. Natsuhi accepted it, trying not to be mean to her daughter for at least a little bit. She even says to thank her for this, she will give her daughter an heirloom from her birth family. Finally, the kids pick up Maria, who is asleep on the couch in the parlor, and leave to go to the guest house with Shannon as their escort. Rosa sees them off, and then mumbles under her breath to herself that she is sorry for everything, Maria. Crocodile tears, bitch. Arrive back at the guest house, and the cousins go up to the big room to play cards together. Shannon, on the other hand, goes to check and see what her shift is supposed to be tonight, where she finds Genji and Cannon. Genji tells her that she now has the night shift at the guest house, so she can go play with the cousins, and Goto would take the night shift at the mansion. Also, Genji and Kumasawa are supposed to sleep at the guest house. Now, you may be wondering why I'm telling you where everyone's location is right now for seemingly no reason, but it'll be important soon enough. Also, everyone's shifts were switched because Kraus was suspicious after that letter, so he made sure all the servants who were serving directly under Kinzo, Shannon, Cannon, and Genji, were as far away from the mansion as possible. Shannon is pretty happy with the shift switch, to be honest, though she does have an ulterior motive up her sleeve. A motive that she won't tell Cannon no matter how much he asks. Cannon then pouts about how the kids didn't invite him to play cards with them like they did Shannon. Genji says that they would have invited him too if he was there, but Cannon just reserves himself to calling himself furniture again, and that's the end of it. Meanwhile, Battler is freaking out in the cousins' room, learning that George and Shannon are actually dating. Jessica told him this after Shannon came by and George all of a sudden forgot something in the mansion and they left together. Speaking of George and Shannon, here they are in the arbor in the rose garden, discussing something in private. After a little awkward small talk, George pulls out a ring and proposes to Shannon. She is shocked and doesn't know what to say, because she is furniture after all and she could never accept something like this. George tells her that she doesn't have to decide right now. He does order her to take the ring with her though, and put it on one of her fingers by tomorrow morning to give him her answer. He won't tell her which finger to put it on though. She has to make that decision herself. Just at that moment though, Shannon remembers conveniently there's something that she forgot to do in the mansion, and she runs off to take care of whatever it is. Genji and Cannon show up in the mansion early in the morning, and it's still storming outside. This storm really will be lasting all day after all, just like the weatherman said. They go through their morning chores of opening all the window shades and the whatnot, and they notice that Gota hasn't started breakfast yet. In fact, he's nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Natsuhi wakes up in her room after having a suspiciously good night's sleep. She debates just staying in her room for forever, before realizing that if she did, Ava would definitely never let her hear the end of it, especially for sleeping in while she had guests. As she goes to open the door, she notices the charm that Jessica gave her, still hung on the door. She smiles a little bit thinking about it. Jessica really was trying to be thoughtful when she gave her that, especially knowing the shitty day that she had before. Just then, as she's reaching for the knob, Genji knocks on the door. The servants usually never come to wake her up in the morning, so she was confused by him being here. It's possible that something bad has happened. She opens the door, and Genji informs her that the telephones on the island are out due to the lightning the night before. Also, Gota is missing, so breakfast hasn't been started yet. This was a disaster in the eyes of Natsuhi, so she starts to bark orders at Genji when she notices that. There were bloody handprints all over the door, like someone was scratching at it trying to get in. Natsuhi immediately assumed that it must have been some sort of prank, but I mean, come on, that is a pretty crazy prank to pull on somebody. Natsuhi tells Genji to have somebody clean it right away, and heads to the parlor where Eva and Hideyoshi are already waiting. At that moment, Kanon also arrives in the parlor running. He whispers something to Genji, and then Natsuhi tells him to start breakfast ASAP. Kanon gets nervous and looks at Genji. Then he turns to Natsuhi and says that it isn't just Goto who's missing. Her husband Kraus, as well as Rudolph, Kirie, and Rosa are also missing. Now it was starting to get weird. At least 5 people were missing, that we know of. And there was basically nowhere for them to go on this island in a typhoon. Being an optimist, Natsuhi suggests that maybe they went out for a walk to continue their friendly chat on the beach or in the rose garden. According to Eva and Hideyoshi, they went to bed at around midnight and the others were still up arguing when they left, so they very well could have been going at it all night. If that was the case, maybe they really did go on a walk to cool their heads. Natsuhi tells Kanon to go search for them outside, and then she goes to give her daily report to Kinzo up in his study. Eva offers to go up with her, but Natsuhi won't allow it since she's a guest. This was obviously not what Eva wanted to hear, and she snidely tells Natsuhi that she better convince him to come down for breakfast at least. If she can't, she had better never claim again that she has father's trust. Genji then gives Natsuhi the key to the study and tells her that she'd better use it to go talk to Kinzo and convince him to come out. He probably won't respond if she just knocks on the door. Natsuhi takes the key and heads off to the study. Meanwhile, at the guest house, Maria had just woken up. After coming to her senses, she realizes that her mother is not with her. She immediately gets lonely and leaves to check the room that her mother is supposed to be staying in. After a minute, she comes back into the room and starts yelling at the top of her lungs for everybody to wake up. When everybody finally wakes up, Maria tells them that Rosa is not at the guest house. In fact, she yells it at them over and over again. To get her to finally stop, Jessica and Battler suggest moving over to the mansion for breakfast. After all, Rosa is surely over there. So with that, the children head on over. Determined to convince Kinzo to come down and meet with the family, Natsuhi enters the study. The first thing she noticed was the horrible stench in the room from all of Kinzo's weird experiments. Kinzo was already up, staring at the window as she walked in. He immediately asks her how she got in. She tells him that Genji gave her the key, so he assumes it must have been for a good reason. After all, he trusts Genji's judgment. She asks him to please at least come down and see his family for breakfast, but of course he refuses. He says how could he go down there and witness his vulture children trying their best to chew up his inheritance. Natsuhi figures his response would be this much, so she accepts it and gives up and starts to leave. Before she does though, Kinzo calls to her. He asks her if she misses her birth family after all the treatment she's gotten in this family over the years. Of course she says she doesn't regret her marriage or being brought into the Ushiromiya family, and this was the truth. After all, the fact that she had forsaken her birth family is why she felt so upset that Kraus never trusted her. Kinzo tells her that he appreciates all the hard work that she does for this family and that she always tries to protect his honor. And she does this even though she has no right to wear the Ushiromiya family crest, the one-winged eagle, on her clothes since she is not a blood relative. However, even though she is not allowed to wear it on her clothes, she certainly has it engraved on her heart. This is proof that in his mind she is in fact a relative to him, and she will inherit the Ushiromiya family's glory when he dies. He says that she should ignore anyone who tries to discredit that fact, including the people in the family itself. Only the people with the one-winged eagle engraved on their hearts are his true relatives. After this conversation, Natsuhi feels a newfound sense of purpose and belonging. She leaves the study, where she runs into Eva at the door. She says that Natsuhi was taking so long that she decided to come and check on her. However, Natsuhi was unbothered by this. She tells Eva that Kinzo will not be coming down for breakfast to talk to the ingrates that are his children. Eva is taken aback and has no response. After walking down the stairs, Eva asks Natsuhi if Kinzo knows where the others are, but of course he wouldn't know, so Natsuhi didn't even bother asking. Natsuhi turns to her and confidently asks if she would like to go wait in the parlor while she makes some tea for her. Eva did not understand Natsuhi's newfound sense of confidence and just responds with, "Yes, that will be fine." When they get to the parlor, the kids and Nanjo are already there. Genji tells Natsuhi that they still haven't found the others and that Kumasawa had started to make breakfast. Man, we are really worried about breakfast. Also, Cannon is still outside searching for everyone, and Shannon seems to be missing as well. About that time, Cannon came rushing back into the parlor. He says that he didn't find the others, but he did find something strange at the garden storehouse. However, he didn't know how to describe what he had seen. He had come back to the mansion to get the key to the storehouse, and after everyone's interest had been piqued, Cannon, Genji, Hideyoshi, and Eva left in a hurry to the rose garden. The children, though, were too busy watching TV to care, so they stayed behind. When the four finally arrived at the storehouse, they realized why Cannon was at a loss for words earlier. On the big shuttered door, there was a drawing in blood. It was a cross inside 2 circles and some writing in Hebrew around it. According to Cannon, that drawing was not there yesterday, so it must have been done at some point during the night. Genji then remembers the other quote-unquote painting that he saw in blood recently, the scratches on Natsuhi's door. No doubt these 2 things were connected. Eva tells Cannon that he needs to clean this graffiti off immediately. He agrees and unlocks the shutter to grab some paint out of the storehouse, and then he throws the door open. For just a moment, they felt a little relief not seeing that creepy drawing anymore. The kids in the mansion were watching TV, and Nanjo was sitting on the couch reading quietly to himself. Genji comes running into the parlor, out of breath, and he approaches Nanjo where he tells him to come with him immediately. When he asks what is wrong, Genji whispers something in his ear, and the 2 hurry off back to the storehouse. They run into Natsuhi in the hallway on her way back to the parlor with tea. They tell her something, and then she immediately heads off with them out of the mansion, leaving the serving cart in the hallway. George notices them running outside through the window and is confused. He suggests that something might be wrong, and the cousins head out to go investigate. They run around the garden to the storehouse where they see Genji, Nanjo, and Natsuhi. When Natsuhi noticed that the children were approaching, she immediately started screaming at them to not come any closer. They needed to go back to the mansion right away. But by the time she said that, it had been too late. Behind Natsuhi, what was in the storehouse was already in full view. Inside that shed, there were 5 bodies immediately in view. Rudolph, Rosa, Kirie, Goda, and Kraus were all lying there on the ground with half of their heads completely blown away. The scene was gruesome. They had all been brutally murdered, but still left in a way where you could see half their faces. Just enough that there was no mistaking that those were the people laying dead there. According to Dr. Nanjo, it was likely that at least 6 hours had passed since their deaths. Jessica and Battler are immediately grief-struck, screaming and crying over their murdered parents lying in that shed. Natsuhi luckily catches Jessica before she gets too close to the scene, but Battler was not so lucky. After all, his parents, the people who should have caught him, were dead right there on the ground in front of him. Battler falls to the ground, crying over them. Nanjo tries to peel him off to keep him from being traumatized anymore, but it was no use. He was inconsolable. But that's only 5 of the 6 people that were missing. There was one more, right? One more person was missing this morning. George seems to have caught on to this as well, and he asks his father if there are any other people lying in the storehouse. Hideyoshi responds, no, there is one more. There was one more person laying around the corner where Hideyoshi could see. Behind that mountain of blood and bodies was Shannon, murdered in exactly the same way as the others, with half of her face completely eviscerated. George starts trembling with grief. Before he becomes completely catatonic, he asks his father one more question. He asks if she's wearing a ring on her finger, and if so, what finger is it on? Hideyoshi looks and then says, the ring finger of her left hand. With that, George had his answer to the proposal from the night before. She had chosen to marry him, but unfortunately, that would never happen now. Ava, realizing what this meant, starts to get upset with George before Hideyoshi immediately cuts her off. He tells her that whoever gave Shannon that ring had made her very happy in the end, and she should respect that. Cannon also stood there. However, he did not have George's privilege of not seeing the gruesome state of Shannon's body. It would be forever burned into his brain. He was completely grief-stricken by the loss of someone that he saw as his older sister. After staring at the scene, Natsuhi eventually comes to her senses and tells Genji to contact the police immediately. However, as we already know, the phone lines have been disconnected because of the storm. Genji starts to grab some towels to cover the faces of the bodies, to at least give them a little bit of dignity. Before he can do that, though, Ava stops him. After all, this is a crime scene, and he can't tamper with it. Understanding this, everyone decides to leave the scene and close the door to the storehouse and lock it. That way, no one could tamper with the crime scene before the police arrived. And with that, the curtain closes on this tragedy. 6 people had died, and no one knows what could have happened. Everyone returns to the parlor of the mansion, still completely in shock as to what they had just seen. Everyone, that is, except for Maria, who had stayed behind and watched TV. She was the only one lucky enough to not have to witness the gruesome murders for herself. Natsuhi, trying to be the emotional center of the group, says she will go to see Grandpa and tell him what has happened. Ava decides that she is tired of Natsuhi taking the spotlight and says that she will go with her since she is now in charge of taking care of Father now that Kraus is gone. Boy, it really did not take her long to rebound from that murder scene, huh? After all, this is Ava's big chance to grab power while she can, and you know she's not going to let that bitch Natsuhi take up the role of the leader. And so, they both head up to the study. Soon after, Kumasawa comes into the parlor completely distraught. She tells the people there that she found a lot of blood in the dining room as she was setting up for breakfast. Everyone quickly goes to the dining hall to investigate, where they found several pools of dried blood on the dining room floor. It quickly became obvious what happened. Whoever killed those people that were in the storehouse must have gone into the dining room while the family conference was happening and killed them. It also must have happened at some point past midnight because that is when Hideyoshi and Ava left to go to bed. After replaying that horrible scene in their minds again, everyone decides to leave the dining hall so as to not mess with this crime scene either. There was nothing to be gained by staying in here anyways. Genji returns to the parlor with yet even more bad news. He had tried to contact the police via radio, but apparently the radio was not working either. So at this point, they really did not have any way to contact the outside world at all. That means, until the storm passes, everyone here at the mansion would be trapped on this island with whoever killed all those people in the storehouse, no matter what. During the commotion of everyone freaking out, realizing that they would be stuck here in danger, Maria finally started to become a part of the conversation. Even though she hadn't been told what was happening, the first question she asked was, she said it in such a calm and nonchalant way, and this made Jessica really upset. Maria, unfazed, asks how many people died. Jessica says that 6 people had died. It was an inhuman act. She says that she doesn't know who the culprit was, but they are definitely not human. Maria frankly responds, "You're right. The culprit isn't human. These murders were just chosen by them." Before anyone can ask her what she meant by that, though, Natsuhi bursts back through the door. She and Ava had gone to see Kinzo in the study, but when they got there, he was missing. Apparently, during all this commotion, he slipped out. However, when the two asked the servants where he might have gone, they all made it very clear that he would never have left that room of his own free will. After all, he never even leaves that room under normal circumstances, and he has everything he needs in there. Eventually, everyone came to the same conclusion. Either something had happened to him, or maybe he was involved with these murders in some way. Right then, though, cutting through the tension, Kumasawa walked in with breakfast. Finally, the fucking breakfast is here. I've been worried about this for so long. It's finally here. We have closure. Anyways, everyone decides to take a break and eat something and calm themselves down. After eating, Natsuhi and the servants go off into the mansion to make sure all the doors and windows are locked, as well as look for Kinzo, leaving Ava, Hideyoshi, Nanjo, and the kids in the parlor. After they all left, Ava approaches Battler to commend him on how strong he has been through all this. You know, other than when he was crying like a baby earlier. Battler responds that he got all of his crying out in one go earlier. Now he's preoccupied with a new emotion. He wants to find out who did this. It turns out, Battler was not alone in this. Ava had also started trying to figure this out. But not only who did it, where are they? After all, wherever they are definitely on this island. Then, Battler asks her the same thing that he and Kirie talked about the night before. He asks Ava if she thinks Beatrice is one of the 18, or if she thinks that she is someone else entirely. Ava immediately responds, "It's obvious. There's no way there's anyone on the island besides them. Someone must be pretending to be the witch Beatrice for their own personal gain. So by that extension, it must also be true that whoever murdered these people were one of the 18 that we already know." Also, it was very impressive for whoever did this to drag all those bodies from the dining hall to the storehouse. On top of that, the storehouse is always locked, so the culprit would have had to unlock the shutter in order to store the bodies there. Whoever did this must have had to have known that the keys were stored in the servant room. There are lots of keys on the wall in that room, so you would have had to have known which key it was as well. Needless to say, the culprit would have had to have known the inside of the servant room quite well. If the bodies had just been thrown out into the storm, then it wouldn't have been a problem. But the fact of the matter is, there was only one key to that shutter. It was in the servant's room, and members of the family would have no reason to be familiar with those keys. Another thing that is reasonable to consider is that whoever the culprit is, there is probably more than one of them, and they are definitely armed in some way. After all, they killed 6 people and dragged them to that storehouse, then drew the magical circle on the shutter door, all within one night. That would have been incredibly difficult for one person to do. I think it's fair to say, Ava suspects the servants. However, the servants are far from the only suspects. In fact, they really are just the easiest people to suspect. It's all too convenient of a conclusion to reach. After all, wasn't it the servants in the first place that found the magical circle on the shutter? Why would they point out where the bodies were stored on purpose? Also, there was the fact that the magical circle and the bodies were in a place that is so explicitly connected to the servants, makes it seem like somebody was trying to frame them. Seeing as how they don't really have anything to gain by killing all the people on this island, it stands to reason that since it was mainly Ushiromiya's that got killed, the culprit might be one of the family members themselves. In fact, someone like Ava has a lot to gain from eliminating all the other surviving heirs to the family fortune. The fact that the family is as rich as it is would be enough motive to kill all of them while sealed away from the outside world. In fact, this also explains Kinzo's disappearance, since Ava would need him out of the picture as well. Either way, there are multiple people with plenty of motive and means to carry out these murders, and with the clues presented to us so far, it would be hard to rule out many people as suspects. Meanwhile, some of the people in the parlor started to discuss the magical circle again. After all, why would somebody draw such a thing? The only person that maybe would have some knowledge of these sorts of things is Kinzo. No one else is even interested in that sort of occult stuff. Well, other than Maria. George shows her a crude drawing of it, and immediately she recognizes what it is. This causes her to start smiling in a mocking manner. Then she started to laugh in a creepy, menacing way. She says, "This is the 7th magic circle of the sun." The characters are written in Hebrew. She then proceeds to take the drawing and fill in the missing pieces from memory. Everyone was shocked that she was able to recreate it exactly like it was written on the shutter door. George asks her what it means, and she says that it is a magical circle to borrow the power of the sun. He who wears it as a talisman drawn in gold shall be able to break free from the bonds of any prison and receive the power to gain freedom. Basically, it refers to the release of mental bonds such as an inescapable fate or ties of obligation. Hideyoshi, confused by this, didn't understand why you would want to draw this on the shutter door. Maria responds that it was not for the sake of the dead people inside. Rather, the 6 that were dead inside were dead for the sake of the magical circle to gain power. Around the outside of the magical circle, a Bible verse was written. Psalms 116 verse 16 to 17. "The Lord has freed me from my chains. I will offer you the sacrifice of thanksgiving and will call on the name of the Lord." The people that were murdered were human sacrifices made in order for the magical circle to be effective. Ever since the letter from Beatrice arrived yesterday, it had started to feel like this island was being sucked into another universe. Now the realization of what that magic circle meant and the murders that had happened really drove the feeling home. Maybe it all really was the work of magic. As Battler and the rest all thought about this, Natsuki had returned, but this time she walked in with a gun in her hands. She urged everyone not to be alarmed by it, and she only brought it for everyone's protection in case the killer tries to break into the mansion. Furthermore, she makes the suggestion that everyone stays in the parlor so that way no one can get cornered alone, as well as the fact that Ava pointed out, with everyone in the same room it would be much easier to keep an eye on everyone. Natsuki is trying to protect everyone from an outside threat, while Ava is obviously trying to protect from an inside one. So the question remains, is there another person on this island? Is the culprit one of the 18? Or is this all just the work of a witch? I guess only time will tell. The servants were cleaning up after breakfast. Well, Kumasawa was cleaning, while Genji and Kanon were sitting down resting. They finally had their first chance to grieve the loss of their fellow servant Shannon. Not Goda, though. Fuck Goda. Kumasawa, who didn't see Shannon's body, said that she wished she could have seen her face at least one more time. However, Kanon, who remembers the scene vividly, twitched a little bit when she said that. Kanon pleads with Genji why Beatrice had to kill Shannon when there were plenty other victims to choose from. Genji reassures him that it was just bad luck from the roulette of fate, and there was nothing that could have been done about it. Just then, though, they remember the bloody scratches that were on Natsuhi's door. If it wasn't for her hanging that charm on her door, Shannon might not have died, and Natsuhi would have taken her place. While they're talking about this, Battler walks in, trying to get away from the family for a little bit, and out of that parlor. But he definitely overheard the conversation they were having about the witch, so he asks just who is she actually. Hesitantly, after looking at each other, they explain. Beatrice is a witch that lives in the forest of Rokenjima. She definitely exists. She's a real person who gave Kinzo that 10 tons of gold all those years ago, just like the story Battler had been told in the past by his family. Of course, Battler always just assumed that it was a ghost story that his family told him to scare him, but the servants were dead serious. Beatrice exists, and she lives on this island. Battler asks them if they have seen her today or yesterday. Genji and Kanon both fail to find the words to explain. Then Kumasawa laughs. She says, you cannot see her face because she has no form. Genji then adds on that she has no body, so unless she wills it, normal people will not be able to see her. However, sometimes she will take the form of golden butterflies fluttering through the mansion. The painting in the main hall is what she looked like back when she did have a human form, and Kinzo would often stare at that painting for hours after it was commissioned, because he missed her that much. It is said that whenever you see a golden butterfly in the mansion, you must absolutely not chase it. One time, a servant did that exact thing, and they got very badly injured that night in an accident. They quit very soon after. The servants beg Battler not to say things like Beatrice doesn't exist, because she hates to be profaned, especially in that way. And just as they say that, Maria appears out of nowhere behind him and laughs. She calls Battler an idiot with a mismatched wavelength, and the fact that he can't believe in her makes Beatrice hate him the most. After all, she read a letter explicitly from Beatrice yesterday, right? Battler just thought to himself, this is all ridiculous. But then he looked at the servants, and they were completely stone-faced. Maria says something very ominous. She says, Beatrice exists in this room right now. Battler then realizes that this whole time, the servants and Maria were not looking at him. No, this whole time, they've been looking just behind him, and they were all looking at the exact same spot, right behind him. He turns around and he sees nothing. There's no one there, but they're all looking there, as if somebody's standing right there in that spot. Battler starts to get worried. Maria says to him, it really is sad that he's unable to sense any magic because of his mismatched wavelength, and that's why he denies that she exists. He really is very lucky that Maria gave him that charm yesterday, or else he might have already been dead. No, he definitely would already have been dead by now. Beatrice really hates people that aren't able to sense magic. Yes, he really would be dead if it wasn't for that charm. Battler starts to laugh. Then, he pulls the rug out from under her. He tells her that at some point he lost that charm yesterday. He didn't even realize that it was important, and it slipped out of his pocket at some point the night before. He didn't want to say anything because it would make Maria upset, but he definitely didn't have it anymore. Anyways, obviously since he didn't get killed, even though he lost that charm, that means magic doesn't exist. Case closed, everyone. Congrats. Magic wavelengths? The witch's gold? Small food bombs? Don't be ridiculous. Back in the parlor, Natsuhi seems to have given up on her order that everyone stay in the parlor, as many people have left to gone to the bathroom or whatever. After all, it's undignified to force your guests to stay in one room forever. They might get uncomfortable. However, even though everyone was allowed to leave, they were too scared to stay out for more than a few minutes. Battler goes up to George and asks him straight up if Maria has a split personality or something, because her demeanor in the kitchen was unlike anything he has ever seen from her. Once she starts talking about witches, it's like she becomes a completely different person. George explains it like this. She's a kid who doesn't know anything, and everyone discounts what she says based on the fact that she has no life experience at all. But If she pretends to be a 1,000-year-old witch, that means she all of a sudden has tons of life experience and can know more than even the adults. Of course, this is getting made worse by the crazy situation that they're in that Maria does actually seem to know a lot about. Then the cousins recap the information of everybody's alibis during the first murder. The murder must have taken place between midnight and 6 a.m. as told by the doctor's time of death estimate. There are plenty of people who do not have solid alibis for that time period. There were plenty of servants on the night shift and other people that said that they went to bed. For it to be believable that this crime was not only done by a witch, but also by a 19th person in general, there would need to be a murder where everyone has solid alibis. That is the only way that you could say for 100% certain that it is not one of the people that we already know about. Basically, good luck figuring out the truth of this mystery just based on the information we have so far. One good thing that has come from the discussion so far is that Battler realizes that the culprit, whoever they are, wants the family to attempt to solve the epitaph. Hideyoshi seemed to be at least a little bit interested in trying after hearing this, but Natsuhi immediately says that it is ridiculous and throws that away. She says the gold is definitely not real, and if the culprit thinks it's real, then they are only trying to make them solve it so that the culprit can snatch away all the gold for themselves. But even then, why would they kill some of the highest ranking members of the family? It doesn't seem like a good strategy. Ava agrees with that. In fact, if they wanted to solve the epitaph, wouldn't it be easier to just threaten father themselves? Natsuhi assures her, though, that Kinzo would never bow down to such a threat, and he is the glorious leader of the Ushiromiya family. We all owe our lives to him. But wait, Kinzo is already missing. Battler makes the logical conclusion that he might have been kidnapped or taken somewhere and killed. One other person also was thinking this, though. Ava. And it seemed that by jumping into this conversation, Natsuhi had fallen right into Ava's trap. After everything that's happened so far, it's obvious that Kinzo is wrapped up in the crime in some way. And there's only been one person who's been interacting with Kinzo today. Also, when did he disappear anyways? It had to have been between the time Natsuhi went to see him this morning and when they went back to report the murders. Hideyoshi asked the room who was the last person to see father today. Natsuhi immediately answers, "It was me," and pulls out the key to the study that Genji gave her to return to him. Natsuhi, being overeager to seem important, gave Ava the perfect chance to pounce. First, ask Genji if there's any way in or out of that study other than the locked door, verifying that there is only one entrance. Of course, Genji says that it's true. The auto-locking door that the key belongs to is the only entrance and exit to the study. Ava then asks every other servant in the room if they are absolutely sure that no other exits like a hidden door exists. If not, someone in this room is about to be very suspicious. Of course, Kanon and Kumasawa also agree that there are no other entrances to the room. Now that she's absolutely sure that she is correct, Ava makes her move. She asks Natsuhi if when she went to the study to report the murders, if she noticed anything when she opened the door. Of course, Natsuhi says no, but Ava was with her and tells her that is not correct. When she opened the door, Natsuhi noticed a receipt fall from the crack in the door and she quickly picked it up. This receipt was a plant made by Ava, a seal on the door of sorts. She had suspected that Natsuhi was up to something, so she put the receipt in the door after Natsuhi had the conversation with Kinzo that morning. She put it there just in case some weird stuff started to happen, like Kinzo leaving his room. However, the receipt was still in the door when they went to go tell Kinzo about the murder. Not only that, Ava noted the position of the receipt in the door when she put it there, and it had not moved an inch since then. That is, until it fell on the floor after Natsuhi opened the door again. Jessica cuts in here to mention that maybe when Grandpa left, he saw the receipt fall and thought it was funny, so he put it back where it was in the door frame. Honestly, that was a pretty good thought, but Ava said there is no way because it was in the exact same spot she left it. She's sure of it. It was not even a millimeter out of place. Natsuhi becomes outraged. She could not believe that Ava would pull that kind of a prank on her. Then she says that it was probably Ava that pulled that prank putting all that red paint on her door. And it was probably her that drew that creepy drawing on the storehouse shutter. This was new information to Hideyoshi and Ava though. Nobody ever said anything about paint on Natsuhi's door. Ava realizes this must just be a distraction tactic and pivots back to the study. Between the time Natsuhi confirmed that he was in his room and the time they both confirmed he was not in his room, the door was never opened even once. How could Kinzo have gotten out if he didn't go through the door? We have already confirmed that there were no other exits with multiple people, so there should have been no way to get out. Next step was to confirm that he was in the room before Natsuhi met with him. First, Nanjo said that he had been up there with him until dinner last night playing chess, so at that point, Kinzo was definitely still in his room. After that, Genji and Kanon saw him when they went to give him his dinner, and he was definitely in the room then. Then, after that, Natsuhi said that she had met with Kinzo in the morning, and as we already know, between the time she met with Kinzo and the time she and Eva went to the study after the murder, there was no way for him to get out since there are no other exits and the door was sealed with the receipt. This was all very damning for Natsuhi. Someone, whether it be Natsuhi or Eva, is definitely lying about what happened pertaining to the study this morning. Either the receipt was actually moved and then put back in the same spot, and Eva is lying that there's no way it could have been moved. Or Natsuhi is lying about Kinzo being in the study when she saw him this morning. One thing is for certain though, Eva is trying desperately to convince everyone that she is definitely right and Natsuhi is lying. Why she is lying though is still up for debate. After all, she should have no reason to lie about seeing Kinzo this morning, which was pointed out by Jessica. But Eva would not let her get away with that. After all, there is one reason that Natsuhi would have to lie about it, and that reason would be to fake the time of death for Kinzo to create an alibi for herself. And if only it wasn't for that pesky receipt, she would have gotten away with it. Natsuhi was furious. She yells back that Eva cannot just use a silly idea like a receipt seal that she got from some detective novel. Besides, once the police come, everything that they are talking about right now won't matter anyways. That's right, the police will surely get to the bottom of it. After all, this is modern day 1986. Maybe something silly like that receipt trick would have worked in the past, but not anymore. But are modern day methods really enough? After all, Nanjo was only able to estimate the time of death within a few hours. And he's a doctor. A doctor, honey. And besides, the police investigation will have to wait until at least tomorrow, only further skewing how accurate a time of death could be calculated. Who knows what kind of tampering would happen within that amount of time. Nanjo agrees with her that it would be very hard to get a completely accurate time of death, and a lot of autopsies do come down to some intuitive reasoning. Usually there can be at least a few hours of error in an autopsy, and that is why the receipt is so important. Eva sinisterly says that she does not want to suspect Natsuhi, after all she wants to prove her innocence here and now. This is basically when all hell breaks loose. Natsuhi pulls her gun out and points it at Eva. She starts to scream that Eva is attacking her honor, and she will not stand for it. Eva, unfazed, yells back that she should just fucking shoot her and seal her own fate at this point. Genji and Jessica try to intervene and calm down Natsuhi, but Eva only eggs her on more and tells her that she has to explain how Kinzo left the room. She could be proven innocent if she only explained that, but of course Natsuhi doesn't know the answer to that, meaning at this point she is completely cornered. Natsuhi yells that there is no way she needs to explain herself. Then Eva goes for the kill. She says that there is only one place that Kinzo could have gone if the door was never opened, and that is that he was thrown out the window. Natsuhi threw him out the window, murdering him in cold blood. Then later, took the body and hid it to obscure the time of death. You could just as well suspect her for every other crime, even the letter. Hell, she probably even scratched her own door up with blood. After all, she told everyone that she went to bed and she wasn't seen for the rest of the night. With just this receipt in the door, she is able to reach this conclusion. What do you think, everyone? Just then though, Battler cuts in.
It's useless. It's all useless, Aunt Eva.
Useless, you say? What is? Battler-kun, tell me.
You're only convinced it was Aunt Natsui because you're only looking at the case from a single angle. It's not like I'm defending her, but that bluff of a checkmate isn't gonna fly. I think your reasoning regarding the receipt is passable, and it's not a bad thread of logic, but I'd only give it a grade of 65 at best. If this were an exam, that'd be bad enough to get you extra lessons in detention, right?
Oh my, well, how do you think anyone could break through the door sealed by my receipt and make father disappear? Other than by my theory.
It's true that your theory's an interesting one, and if you could say for sure that there was no way to make grandfather disappear, then you'd probably be able to prove that the last person to see him, Aunt Natsui, was guilty. However, since there's still a possibility that she's innocent and that these accusations are false, we can't be sure about that.
Then, Battler-kun, are you saying someone other than Natsuhine-san made grandfather disappear? It'd be impossible for anyone else to do it. My receipt proved that, right?
Like I said, Aunt Ava, only 65 points. So let's try spinning the chessboard around, shall we? The question isn't how somebody managed to make grandfather disappear from the outside. We should think about how grandfather disappeared from the inside. The door has the receipt stuck in it, so it couldn't have been used. He also couldn't have gone through the window because you can't lock it from the outside, and when Aunt Ava visited the study, she checked to make sure it was locked, so the window also wasn't used. At that point, the study really was a closed room. We have to accept this. However, the study didn't remain a closed room forever. Once the seal created by the receipt was removed, it'd be possible for someone to escape by the door. In other words, the question isn't how Aunt Natsui made grandfather disappear, we need to think about how he was able to escape. Grandfather's study isn't an ordinary study, right? According to Genji, there's a toilet and a kitchen and even a bedroom, almost like a little house. For example, what if he was hiding under the bed and the two of you only thought he was missing? Aunt Ava, even you didn't think to check that far, right? And then the two of y'all went back down the stairs thinking he wasn't there. At that time, the receipt was already gone. In other words, if grandfather was hiding in his room the whole time and it was a closed room, and escaped after letting the two of you go past him, we can crack this closed room right open. Yeah, it might be absurd. However, it still shows that there's a possibility Aunt Natsui is being falsely accused. Your receipt wasn't perfect. In chess, we might call that check, but it isn't checkmate. But the thing that really pisses me off is how you're pressuring Aunt Natsui to explain it, and then claiming that she must be guilty if she doesn't. If you want to go down that road, then why don't you let me spin the chessboard around one more time? According to your own argument, you must explain to us why you and Uncle Hideyoshi couldn't have killed those 6 last night and then casually returned to the guest house. You've been trying to force Aunt Natsui to explain, so I'm sure you can prove your own innocence, right? Especially now that all of grandfather's wealth has suddenly dropped down right into your hands.
After all the excitement and being beaten by Battler, Ava and Hideyoshi decide to go take a nap in the guest room. No one objects to this after all the intense arguing that just happened. Genji tells them that he will come and call for them when it is time for dinner. Ava then apologizes for all the excitement, saying she just felt great about her theory with the receipt and decided to run with it. Then with that, they leave the parlor. In the guest room, Ava and Hideyoshi are calming down and trying to relax after all that commotion. They lock the door and put up the chain so that no one would disturb them. Also, there's still a killer on the loose. Even after that scene in the parlor, both of them are still just as scared as the rest of them. Ava, now with her guard down, looks to her husband for approval. She says that Natsuhi is always treated so coldly, but now that she has gotten a little bit of power with Kraus gone, she is just shamelessly throwing around her authority and telling people they can't even leave the parlor. It's ridiculous. Hideyoshi tells her that she went too far with that receipt thing earlier, and she needs to be easier on Natsuhi. Considering the situation, she's doing quite well keeping everyone together. Ava, now sure that she was completely in the wrong back there, decides to change the subject. After all, her and her husband are both alone right now, with no obligations for the first time in a long time. Ever since George was born, their lives have gone by in the blink of an eye. They rarely get any alone time with each other. Ava rushed into having a child when she was young because Natsuhi couldn't conceive for so long. She had hoped that by having a child before Natsuhi, she would give her child a long-shot chance of gaining control of the family. By doing this, though, she basically didn't give herself any time to live. She dedicated her whole life to this one dream and raised George as diligently as she could. But before she knew it, her and her husband both had gotten old. Hideyoshi holds her close and reassures her that he does not regret any of it. After he lost his family to the war, the prospect of getting into the Ushiromiya family was something that he was more than happy to do. He was willing to do anything just to relive that warmth of having a family again. Ava feels comforted by her husband, who obviously loves her no matter what, and she snuggles up to him. Hideyoshi proposes that after New Year's, they both take some time off from their jobs and go on a vacation, just the two of them. Hopefully then, they can finally relax, if only for a little while, and just be with each other like before George was born. For as harsh as Ava can be when she's around her family, she is almost a completely different person when she is just with her husband. They both relax on the bed with the TV playing in the background and the sound of rain on the windows. With Eva and Hideyoshi gone, the mood in the parlor had calmed down quite a bit, but everyone was still stressed out. The servants were preparing dinner for everyone, trying to brighten the mood a little bit. Genji and Nanjo were playing chess in the corner of the kitchen. When dinner was done, Genji asked Natsuhi if they will eat in the parlor again. She says yes, and to go ask Eva and Hideyoshi if she would rather eat in the parlor or take their dinner in the guest room. In the interest of not going anywhere in the mansion alone, Kanon goes with Genji to see Eva. When they get to the room, Genji knocks on the door and calls to them, but there's no response. Then, Kanon notices something on the floor, slipped under the door. There is another envelope, just like the one that Maria had received the night before. Someone must have slipped it under the door to try to give it to Hideyoshi and Eva. It was obviously not meant to be seen by the servants, but they couldn't just ignore it, seeing that it was another one of Kinzo's personal letters. After all, the last time they saw one of those letters, it was from Beatrice herself. No doubt, this one was also from her. Genji banged on the door this time, louder, and yelled Ava's name, just in case they were sleeping and didn't hear him the first time. Still no response. This was starting to get concerning. Kanon put his ear up to the door, but he couldn't hear any sounds like someone was inside other than the TV playing. They considered that maybe the two left their room to walk around the mansion, but just to be certain, Genji pulled out his keys and unlocked the door. Normally, he would never do such a thing, but this was a special case. When he tried to open the door, the chain caught, so the chain to the door was set, meaning they were definitely in there, but still they didn't respond to Genji's calls. Realizing what this might mean, Genji tells Kanon to go cut the chain, and he will tell Natsuhi what has happened. Before he runs off though, Genji tells him to get Kumasawa to go with him to get the cutting tool, just to be safe. Genji runs back to the kitchen and gets Nanjo to come with him to get Natsuhi before going to the guest room. Genji is definitely expecting the worst. Kanon and Kumasawa go to get the wire cutters and rush back to the guest room where they find... Around the door, there were markings in blood. It was another magic circle. This time, though, the shape was different. Kanon was speechless, and Kumasawa quietly screamed. This magic circle had appeared in the time it took Kanon to go get the wire cutters and come back. How is that even possible? Of course, he and Kumasawa immediately realized who it had to have been. Beatrice. Without delaying any more, Kanon opened the door and cut the chain. When he walked in, the first thing he saw was Ava lying face up on the bed, and in her forehead, there was an intricately designed occult stake lodged deep into it. There was blood running down her face and dripping onto the sheets. Ava had been killed, there's no doubt about it. But where was Hideyoshi? Kanon went to go check the bathroom, and when he opened the door, steam poured out and the shower was on. The curtain was half open, and in the bathtub laid Hideyoshi naked with both eyes open. Plunged into his forehead was yet another one of those stakes. Just then, they heard Natsuhi running in the hall. She arrived at the room, and immediately she saw Ava on the bed and Hideyoshi in the bathroom. She tells Kanon to turn off the shower to at least give Hideyoshi a little bit of dignity. Genji turns to Nanjo and immediately he knows what he has to do. He pronounces both of them dead, and then after a little bit of inspection, figures they probably died about an hour ago. But the real question was, how is this weapon plunged into their skulls? It was very thick and had barely any handle on it at all. It was not something that would have been very easy to kill somebody with. It's basically like a really thick ice pick. Nanjo thought about taking the weapons out to investigate them, but thought better of it to preserve the crime scene. After regaining her senses, Natsuhi tells the servants to seal this room up at once so that way the children don't see it. But it was already too late. George and the other children were already in the hallway outside the room. They had become suspicious when everyone else left in a hurry and came to see what had happened. As soon as George caught a glimpse of this gruesome scene, he broke down crying. He wasn't the only one crying though. Battler had his back against the wall of the hallway, crying like a baby. He had a lot of empathy for George, since he had now lost his true love and his mother and father in the span of hours. Everyone here had lost at least one person close to them, but no one had lost as much as George. Whoever had been murdering all these people, there was no doubt about it. They were a monster. And now Battler had a newfound determination to find out whoever was doing this and put a stop to it. He made a vow that he will not let this culprit leave the island. He's no longer going to wait for the next day to come. He's going to go on the offensive and expose this person tonight. Natsuhi decided to lock this room as well until the police come. She made this decision before anyone could even come up with a counter-proposal. And so, the crime scene was locked away from investigation by the people who were left. They still hadn't opened the letter that was under the door, but they decided to do that when they got back to the parlor. As they were walking back, though, they noticed something. There was an awful smell going throughout the mansion. Maria was the first to notice it, but everyone else soon noticed it as well. It smelled like something was burning. Kumasawa thought that maybe she left a burner on and hurriedly went to go check and see. Genji quickly told Kanon to go with her to be safe, and so Kanon ran to follow her. The smell was really terrible, and it seemed like it was getting worse by the second. Meanwhile, though, Battler pulls George aside and asks him for a favor. George immediately knew what he was going to say, though, and he said he'd do whatever it takes to catch this person. George had now grown a hatred in his heart, and he would do anything to get at the person who took everything from him. So let's talk about this murder. This time, only 2 people were murdered, Eva and Hideyoshi. They were both murdered with stakes like you would kill a vampire with, but they had basically no handle and they were stabbed directly into their skulls. How that would even be possible to do with somebody that was still alive is beyond me. But that's not even the most interesting part about this murder scene. In this room, there were only 2 people, and they were both dead. That means that no one was in the room that could have killed both of them. Now, I know that seems obvious, but there's also another key piece of information about this room that makes this fact a little bit more confusing. That is, that the chain of the door was set until Kanon came and cut it. Not only that, everyone is accounted for before the bodies are discovered. The family members were in the parlor, and the servants and Dr. Nanjo were in the kitchen. Also, Dr. Nanjo declared that when the bodies were found, they had been dead for an hour or so. So what does this all mean? Well, it means 2 things. 1, everyone has alibis for this murder. Everyone is accounted for. And 2, this was not like the garden storehouse where the key was in the servant's room. This room has no way of accessing it from the outside. The most you could open that door, even if you did have the key, is only a few inches. And both of the people inside are dead, killed with a stake stabbed through their head. How? How is this even possible? Whether there are 18 people on this island or 19, the fact remains you cannot get into this room with the chain set, even if you had a key. Not only that, even if you wanted to try to kill them from outside the room, one of them was in the bathroom with the door closed. This was truly an impossible crime. A murder committed in a closed room. Maria seemed to have an explanation as to what happened, though. She asks Battler and the rest if they are all satisfied now. After all, Battler said he didn't want to suspect his family, and now he had a murder that could only have been done by one thing: the Golden Witch, Beatrice. Man, Maria was really basking in this murder, too. Finally, this had all but confirmed that Beatrice is real, and that is what she has been saying from the beginning. Battler, now tired of this smug and inappropriate act, hits her on the head to get her to shut up. At this point, just about everyone was tired of Maria's bullshit. She has been constantly acting smug while people are dying left and right. It was not okay, and she needed to stop. Battler asks her what the magic circle on the door of the guest room means, since that is her area of expertise. Maria laughs again and says that she can't believe how stupid he is to not even understand what this one means. He hits her again, and then she says that she's not going to tell him if he keeps being so mean to her. So of course, he hits her yet again. And this time, she finally gives in. She says it's the first magic circle of the moon. The words written on it are from Psalms 107 verse 16. For he has broken gates of brass and cut through bars of iron. The magic circle itself has 2 effects. First, it can open a door no matter how it has been locked. Second is that when you're blocked by unopenable doors in all directions, it opens a door for you. Using this magic circle in a difficult situation will give you a solution you haven't thought of until then. Maria says this magic circle is a provocation of the humans in the mansion, saying that they could never figure out how that door was opened for her. Changing the subject, Natsuhi butts in to say that she cannot stand the burning stench. At this point, it has become completely unbearable and potent throughout the whole main hall. What is this smell, and where is it coming from? Kanon and Kumasawa, who were off on their own to make sure that the burner wasn't left on in the kitchen, had figured out that the smell was not coming from the kitchen, but rather the basement boiler room. An old room in poor condition, the boiler had been having trouble in the past, so it wouldn't have been a stretch to assume that something was wrong with it again. That must have been where the smell was coming from. Just then, they heard a loud door slam in the basement. There was someone down there. But there couldn't have been anyone down there. After all, everyone is accounted for right now. They were all just at Eva and Hideyoshi's room. Kumasawa fell to her knees in fear, but Kanon decided to charge in and confront whoever was down there. Kumasawa calls his name to try and get him to stop, but it was too late. He had already started running down the basement steps. He knew that he had to rush down to the basement because there was 2 entrances to the boiler room. There was the entrance inside the mansion, and then there was the one that leads to the courtyard. If he was going to catch whoever was down there, he had no time to think. He had to hurry and confront them.
In roulette, you bet on a number or the colors red or black, vying for a payoff. However, low-risk bets like black and red only offer a similarly low payoff. However, if you bet on something with a lower probability, your payoff increases proportional to the risk. The master called succeeding despite an astronomical risk a miracle, and called the astronomical payoff gained as a result magic. I have no interest in what kind of magic you and the master were seeking when you spun that roulette. But you forgot something. You forgot in that roulette, there's a pocket that's neither black or red. I set my heart on just one thing. I decided that if Shannon were to be killed, and I was left alive, I'd sacrifice this life of mine and bring this roulette of yours to ruin! This isn't one of the Master's rules, and it certainly isn't one of yours. I made this rule myself. I am not furniture anymore. I am the 0 on your roulette. I won't let your words lead me astray again. This is where the demon's roulette ends! Wait another 1,000 years in hell for your next summoner! Beatrice!
After being a very brave boy, Kanon was stabbed through the chest by the hands of the same weapon that killed Eva and Hideyoshi. The golden butterflies in the room danced around his corpse, mocking his misplaced bravery. Before dying, he pulled the stake out of his chest and blood poured out. After finally passing out from blood loss, Kumasawa came rushing down the stairs, screaming for someone to come help. The others heard Kumasawa's screams and rushed down the stairs. They weren't even noticing the horrible stench anymore. Instead, they were all focused on poor Cannon laying in a pool of his own blood on the floor. They brought the doctor in to take a look at him, but there was really no point. He was unconscious, but with that huge wound in his chest and the amount of blood loss, there was basically no way he was going to make it. Battler takes a flashlight and looks through the darkness of the boiler room where he sees a door that is cracked open. It looked like someone had left in a hurry. He is told that it goes to the courtyard, and he quickly charges out the door trying to catch whoever just left. Natsuhi chases after him, trying to protect him since he went out into the wide open unarmed and it was obviously dangerous to be alone right now. The courtyard was surrounded from all sides by the mansion. It was built mainly to allow for more light to make its way into the mansion. Battler looked all around for the culprit, but he couldn't see them anywhere. There were 2 doors to the mansion in the courtyard, and of course neither of them were locked since they did not lead to the outside and there wasn't any reason to. The culprit had gotten away yet again. Battler started to break down, crying again. This culprit had now killed 9 people, and there's not even a clear reason as to why they were doing it. Natsuhi vows to Battler, as he is breaking down, that she will protect him and the other children no matter what. She promises him that the culprit will be caught, whoever they are, when the police arrive. There's nowhere for them to go, and they will definitely not get away with it. Back in the boiler room, the servants had dragged out the thing that was making the horrible smell. Burnt to a crisp was the corpse of Kinzo Ushiromiya. He also had a stake driven through his skull. The body was beyond recognition, but Genji knew it was Kinzo because of his 6 toes that he had on each foot. Having 6 fingers or toes in the past had been seen as a sign of leadership. It was partially because of this that Kinzo, who originally was just a person in a branch family distant to the main Ushiromiya family, was called to be the family head by the elders when he was young after the Great Kanto earthquake killed off all of the leading relatives. Beyond this, though, Genji noticed that the head's ring was not on Kinzo's finger, confirming what the letter had said the night before, that Kinzo had given up his ring to Beatrice. They decided to leave the body in the boiler room, and according to Genji, Kinzo had been burning in the boiler for a while, judging by the state of the burns and how low the flames in the incinerator were. Now, 10 people were confirmed dead. If you were gonna suspect one of the original 18 people, then you are quickly running out of possible murderers. Also, there have now been multiple crimes that have been committed that should not have been possible to be committed by the 18 people who were there, so what even is the truth? Is there really a magic witch on this island taking her interest like the letter said? This is just getting more and more confusing as time goes on. Cannon never recovered from that wound, and with him he took valuable information as to who the actual culprit was. Kumasawa was deeply upset, letting Cannon go into that boiler room alone, but Genji reassured her that it wasn't her fault, and if she had went in there, she probably would have died as well. Jessica was completely broken up and crying when Maria came to comfort her. Maria tells her that she doesn't need to worry. Once this is all over, Beatrice will resurrect all the dead people and the love that has been lost, so she will definitely be reunited with Cannon very soon. Everyone will be happy again. Jessica becomes enraged at Maria and starts screaming at her. Maria knew who the culprit was, and it was obvious that Maria was even in cahoots with them. She knew what was going on, but she just kept talking about witches and Beatrice. Genji tells Jessica that she needs to stop and restrains her. Jessica struggles to break free, bargaining with him to let her go because Maria is involved in this and they need to figure out what is going on before they all end up dying. She breaks free and she grabs Maria, but before she can do anything, Natsuhi slaps her in the face. Jessica falls to the floor, sobbing. She was desperate to find some answers and get revenge on whoever is doing this. She would even threaten her 9-year-old cousin if it meant that she had any shot at getting some answers. George leans down and calmly talks to Maria. He says that he knows that Maria is not the culprit. She can't be, she's been with them the whole time. And there would never have even been any time to communicate with the culprit. He only wants to know one thing. Who was the Beatrice that gave her that letter yesterday? Who is she? Was she someone we all knew or a stranger? He tried desperately not to get upset at her, but he felt just as sad and confused about everything that is happening as Jessica did. Of course, we all knew what her answer was going to be. It's been the same since the beginning of all of this when she presented the letter at dinner that night. Maria sums up the struggle that all the people left are having at this point perfectly. The fact of the matter is, as time has been going on, it's becoming more of a reality that all of this really might be the work of a witch. And if it really is a witch that's doing all of this, there's nothing they can do but accept it. There would be no one to fight, no one for the police to arrest come tomorrow, no one that can be bound by the morality of man. That's why they're trying so hard to explain it with human means. It's the only thing they can do right now to fight back. But 10 people have already died. If this witch really does exist, it's all over. Beatrice had promised in that letter that by the time the typhoon passes, she will end everything. This means that there is not much time left for the people who are still alive. Jessica proposes in a panic that Maria needs to be sent away from the rest of them. Natsuhi ignores that, but then turns to Maria and tells her that she needs to stop adding oil to the fire. She's only making people more scared and upset. Then she sent her a death glare that Maria had never experienced before, and this scared her enough to keep her mouth shut. Natsuhi proposes that everyone now needs to devote all their energy just trying to survive until tomorrow. Battler agrees, and then they decide they need to find a place to barricade themselves in for the rest of the night. It was 8 p.m. now, and there was still plenty of time until morning the next day. They needed to find some place that they were going to be able to rest, or else they would definitely not make it until the next day. However, the question remains, where would they hide? Where could they hide? There was a high probability that whoever the culprit was had the equivalent of a master key to the mansion in their possession, and that's how they were able to pass through so easily. Genji confirms that this master key actually does exist, and all of the servants keep one on their person at all times. By just killing even one of the servants, the culprit would have access to one of those master keys. Of course, none of the people at the time thought to check and make sure that the servants still had their master keys after their death, meaning it was highly likely that one of them was stolen. So the question remains, where in the mansion could they go that not even these master keys had access to? As it turns out, there was only one place in the whole mansion where that was the case: Kinzo's study. That door specifically only had 2 keys that would work on it. The master key would not. Those keys were to be in Kinzo's possession as well as Genji. When they found Kinzo's body in the boiler room, Genji took the key to the study that he had on his body and put it in his pocket, meaning that they now had both keys in their possession. The study would definitely be the safest place to hide. Jessica was against this because she thought the study was too creepy, but to be frank, no one gave a fuck about what she thought. The only thing that mattered at this point was surviving. Also, the study was basically like a small house inside of the mansion, so if the survivors were going to hold up in a room, this would not be a terrible one to do it in. With that, everyone makes their way to the study. When Maria noticed the door, she was impressed. On the doorknob, there was an inscription of a scorpion, which as we all know, is a strong ward against magic. This door would protect them from any magic attacks as far as she was concerned. Beatrice would certainly not be able to open this door. George then asks how she got Kinzo out of the study if she can't get in there, to which Maria explains the obvious. Even though Beatrice could not get in there, no doubt she could use her magic to convince him to come out. That would be the only way she could get him. Genji unlocked the door and all the remaining people head inside. As soon as they were locked in, they all searched for a secret exit or another way out, but of course they didn't find any. That door was the only way in or out. Inside the room, there were no TVs or even a radio, only tons of occult books, most of which were not even in Japanese, so the survivors couldn't really do much to pass the time. The servants and Dr. Nanjo begin to discuss Kinzo. Nanjo says that he feels like even though they were friends for years, he never really understood him. It almost felt like at times there were 2 different Kinzos, one who was insane and one who was a wise and kind person. Kumasawa agrees. She says that she also never really understood him, especially when it came to Beatrice. When it came to her, he seemed like a completely different person. Just who is Beatrice anyways? There's no way you could say that she was just some folktale at this point. She was not a witch made up by the adults to scare the kids from going into the forest. She was obviously very important to Kinzo in some way. No matter if she was a real person or actually a witch, she was definitely important to this whole ordeal. No one could deny that fact. Just then, Jessica remembers the letter that Beatrice left at the guest room where Eva and Hideyoshi were murdered. Yeah, I bet even you forgot about that. They still hadn't opened it, and now seemed as good of a time as any to read it. Natsuhi pulled out the envelope and opened it. Inside, this is what it said. Just one sentence. George figured it was probably Beatrice declaring that she was the victor today. Battler then just straight up asks the servants, who is Beatrice actually? Who was she to Kinzo? It was basically taboo to talk about before this point, since if Kinzo was to go to such great lengths as to having a huge painting commissioned of her, then she must be very important to him. Perhaps she was even his mistress. And if that was the case, surely his wife would not have been too happy to hear about that, considering she already suspected that he had a mistress. Natsuhi asks Genji to tell them everything he knows, since he is Kinzo's closest confidant. After a long pause, considering if he even should, Genji finally answers. He says Kinzo definitely had deep feelings of love for her, and he most certainly cared more about her than his late wife. His wife was someone who he was arranged to be married to after the elders chose him to be the new leader of the Ushiromiya family. When he was chosen, he was just a distant relative of the main family and basically had no ties to it at all. But he was taken from his peaceful, happy life to become the puppet of some old men desperately grabbing to gain their retirement before leaving him for broke. Beatrice came to him and granted him with 10 tons of gold that he used to revive and bring back the Ushiromiya family greater than ever before. But he loved her even before she did that. She was the one person who actually cared for him in a life of people that only ever used him for their own political gain. However, she died before the construction of the mansion on Rokkenjima was finished. Grief-stricken, he devoted his life to black magic in a hope that maybe he could revive her one day and they could be together again. When Genji told them all this, Kinzo's strange behavior all started to make sense. His one true love had died, and he was so upset about it that he became a madman and even a hope of being able to see her again. All of a sudden, everything in the study, all the creepy magical objects, and occult books weren't scary anymore. Even the servants who faithfully helped him with his occult hobbies made sense to the family members now. They simply did that for someone who was grief-stricken, losing his one true love. Even the act of saying that she had revived as a witch was just an act of kindness to Kinzo. Battler says that if Kinzo was still alive and here right now, he'd probably be jumping for joy. After all, according to Maria, the witch was about to be revived, and the door to the Golden Land was about to be opened. She really does believe that Beatrice is a witch. After a while of sitting in silence, everyone concluded that they really did feel sorry for Kinzo, but also for his wife. After all, cheating is still cheating, right? You gotta at least feel a little sorry for her. George asks Genji if it's possible that Kinzo and Beatrice had any children, but Genji responds that they did not, at least not that he would know of. Jessica then brings up an orphanage that Kinzo supports with his donations regularly, and even allows the orphans who live there with some on-the-job experience as servants. Some people had said that he was using the servants that he got from there as sacrifices for his black magic experiments. And Jessica believed those stories until now. Of these servants that lived there, Shannon and Cannon were the two that were scheduled during this family conference. And then, after hearing about sacrifices again from that off comment, Battler figured it out. After all, a copy of the epitaph was placed right there under Beatrice's painting in the study. All the murders up until this point were a reference to that riddle. The first twilight would be the 6 victims determined by the key. The second twilight would be tearing apart the 2 who were close. The third twilight, they were to praise the witch's noble name, as shown by the letter. On the fourth twilight, gouge the head and kill, and on the fifth twilight, gouge the chest and kill. This epitaph that they were told to try to solve really didn't have anything to do with hidden gold at all. It was a ceremony to revive a witch. Of course, we all pretty much knew that, but this is when Battler put it together, so good for him, I guess. If they were going to follow the epitaph to its conclusion, that meant 3 more people were about to die. And then the 9th twilight would happen. The witch shall revive, and none shall be left alive. After starting to panic under the realization that they might all die tonight, Battler and the relatives turn around from facing the painting to see just about the last thing that they wanted to see. There was another letter placed on the table. This was also not the letter that Natsuhi had just read, since that was still in her hand. This was a new one that appeared seemingly from nowhere. Natsuhi immediately reacted by picking up her gun and pointing it at the people opposite of the table. That was Nanjo, Genji, Kumasawa, and Maria. After all, the others had their back turned. How could that letter have gotten there if it not placed by one of them? Battler took the letter and ripped it open. Inside, this is what it said.
Are you enjoying the riddle of Kinzo's epitaph? As you are all probably aware, you have very little time remaining. Please abandon any naive hopes of escaping after the storm passes. This game can only end with my victory or yours. When time runs out, I will win by default. There will be no ties. Make sure that you do not misunderstand your current situation.
Natsuhi was convinced. Someone on that side of the table was in cahoots with the culprit. That letter could not have gotten there out of nowhere. Of course, everyone denied that they put it there. I mean, they didn't even notice it until the rest of them did. How could they have put it there? But it didn't matter how much they begged and pleaded with Natsuhi. In a split-second decision, she banished them all from the study, even little Maria. She would protect her family no matter what, and she had no doubt that they were all suspicious. Kumasawa begs her to please not send her out there with the killer, but it was no use. Natsuhi would sentence each and every one of them to death if it meant to protect her family. She also just did not trust Maria by this point, as she had kept on with that wish nonsense even after everyone had told her to stop. Not to mention the fact that she obviously knew what was going on this whole time and yet said nothing. In the end, it didn't matter how much those four pleaded. Natsuhi was the one with the gun. After a tearful goodbye and more begging from Kumasawa, Genji gave up his key to the study, meaning that Natsuhi now had both keys. And finally, they all left the study, being forced out into the dangerous mansion with a killer. Now that the dust had settled, the remaining people in the study wondered if it was the right thing to do to chase them all out. After all, they could very well be innocent. They opened the letter again, and inside was that message from Beatrice and another magic circle, but without Maria, there would be no way to decipher it. To pass the time, Battler looked through Kinzo's books to find the meaning of the magic circle, but he was not having any luck. Most of the books in the study were not written in Japanese, so he couldn't even read them, but he had plenty of time to try and find the meaning until morning. After a while, Jessica starts to wonder if they were too harsh on Maria and the others. Natsuhi tells her that she can't think about that right now. The only thing they need to worry about is surviving until morning. Even though Maria would be an easy target for the murderer, Natsuhi is relieved that they are all gone, because now she could protect the few that were left that she knew were, for a fact, not culprits. Not only that, but she was their only family left, and she knew it was her duty to protect them. They all felt especially bad about throwing Maria out though. She was their family, and she was only 9 years old. Not only that, but there is good reason why she is the way that she is. Even though Rosa never talked about it, her father ran out on her when she was little, and Rosa is often very busy trying to provide a living for her family. Also, even though Rosa wanted to get remarried, Maria often got in the way, causing Rosa to be very upset with her, upset to the point of even hitting her. Maria also gets bullied relentlessly at school, so it's natural that she might be a little weird. It really was sad that they sent her out there like that, and even though Natsuhi also felt bad, she did not go back on her decision. The four left in the study argued about whether it was the right decision to cast the rest out for a while, but then eventually they gave up. Some time went by, and eventually Battler found it, the meaning of the magic circle. It was the third magic circle of Mars, and its meaning was discord. Agitate internal divisions and cause the enemy to bring about their own downfall. Battler realized it, and then the others realized it as well. The letter was a trap. However the letter was placed in the room, it didn't matter. It was meant to cause a rift between the people left and cause them to cast the others out, and it had worked perfectly. The people in the study started to become worried, now knowing that they had made a mistake and fallen right into the culprit's hands. Then, as if on cue, the phone starts to ring. But the phone lines were supposed to be down. But here it was, ringing in the study. Obviously, the culprit must have been behind the phones going down in the first place, so now that it was ringing, it could only mean something bad. They debated about whether to even pick it up, but George insisted that they do it. Natsuhi picks up the phone, but she couldn't hear anything on the other end. She tries saying hello a few times, but then gives up and tries to listen very closely. In the distance, she could hear someone singing. Battler takes the phone from her to listen, but he hears the same thing. Very faintly, it sounded like someone was singing in the distance. It was Maria. But who was it that made the phone call? And why was Maria singing? There were so many questions, but one thing was for certain. This call was a message that Maria was in trouble. If they wanted to help her, they were going to have to go out into the mansion. After grabbing some makeshift weapons, they burst back into the mansion. They knew it was probably a mistake to go back out there, but it was too late for that. They remembered that the others said they were going to go back to the parlor, so they quickly decided that that would be the first place that they checked. They were calling out Maria's name as they made their way there. Then they started to hear Maria's voice singing. Very faintly at first, but as they approached the parlor, it got louder and louder. They got to the door, readied their weapons, and tried to open it, but it was locked. George took the keys, and after a few tries, it unlocked. All of them burst through the door, ready for a fight. When they entered the parlor, though, the sight of what lay before them was horrific. There was blood all over the parlor, and on the floor were Genji, Kumasawa, and Dr. Nanjo. Their faces were smashed just like the people in the storehouse, and plunged into their bodies were the same stakes from before, one in Genji's stomach, one in Nanjo's knee, and one in Kumasawa's calf. Just like that, the 6 through the 8 twilights were fulfilled. Now the 9th one was next. The witch shall revive, and none shall be left alive. Standing in the middle of all this carnage, staring at the wall and singing, was Maria. She didn't even seem to notice the others bursting in and kept singing no matter what. Instinctively, Battler and Natsuhi had pointed their weapons at Maria, and Battler screamed at her, but there was no response. Battler ran up and violently slammed his hand on her shoulder, and that finally startled her. She fell to the ground, but still had her usual blank expression. Despite the insane scene around her, she was still completely normal. Battler asks her just what the hell all of this is and who did it. She responds, Beatrice came into the parlor, told Maria to face the wall and start singing. She said to not stop no matter what happened around her. And then after some time passed, Battler and the rest entered here. Maria didn't witness any of it. She just did exactly as she was told. Battler became enraged and threw his candlestick that he took as a weapon at the wall. George asks her as well who did this, and Maria spawns again, Beatrice. It was Beatrice. Battler is finally convinced. This 19th person, Beatrice, was the culprit. There was no way this was not true. After all, Maria could not have killed these people in this brutal way. He asks Maria where Beatrice went, and she responds that she doesn't know. Wherever she was not in this room, and the parlor was locked. Jessica asks Maria how did she get in and out. Maria responds, Beatrice is a witch, locks don't matter. Of course, Battler doesn't believe it, and Maria just laughs at him. No matter how many times she tells him that Beatrice is a witch, he does not believe, so she just doesn't care anymore. But it doesn't change the fact that she is a witch who can use magic, and nothing can stop her. Then they noticed. Natsuhi was gone. According to Maria, who saw it but didn't say anything, she left reading another letter. Jessica tried to chase after her, but when she tried to open the door, it was blocked by something. Natsuhi had wedged the candlestick that Battler threw against the door and used it to block it shut. Out in the main hall, Natsuhi was in front of the portrait of Beatrice. She threw down the letter that she had read and called out into the mansion. She called for Beatrice the Golden Witch to reveal herself. In the darkness, golden butterflies start to flutter around. Natsuhi had accepted Beatrice's challenge to a duel. That must have been what the contents of the letter were about. Soon, the golden butterflies swarmed together and start to make the shape of a human. That human walked into the light. Natsuhi was now face to face with the witch. She readied her gun while the witch glared and laughed at her. Then, Natsuhi pulled the trigger. As the children broke out of the parlor, they heard a gunshot come from the main hall. They hurried to where they heard the sound, where they found Natsuhi on the ground, face up, with a red bead of blood running down her forehead. She had been shot through the head. By her own gun? There was no one else around, so where else could the bullet have come from? Jessica starts screaming. If only she hadn't run off by herself, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Also, there was no letter on the ground. Even though Maria said that she had left the parlor reading a letter, there was no letter anywhere in sight. Jessica is wailing. Why did her mother kill herself? Why did she leave her all alone? Around that time, they caught a glimpse of the clock. It was about to strike midnight. What had happened these past 2 days? What was the meaning of it all? It seemed like no one would be answering these questions because it was all over. Maria suddenly calls out someone's name into the darkness of the mansion and ran happily towards whatever was over there. Then Battler looked. Over by the portrait, there was a silhouette. No, it was a person. The person who was the subject of that portrait. He picked up Natsuhi's gun and pointed it at that person, but it was meaningless. After all, bullets are useless against a witch. Maria and that person start laughing mercilessly at that moment. Then, the clock strikes midnight. The witch had revived, and now none will be left alive. The witch shall praise the wise and bestow 4 treasures. All the gold from the golden land, the resurrection of all the lost souls, the resurrection of the love that was lost, and finally, to put the witch to sleep for all time. In some strange tea room, Battler, Jessica, George, Maria, Cannon, and Shannon are celebrating their entrance to the Golden Land, their brutal deaths now seemingly reversed. They all discuss their own theories about what could have happened and come to a general consensus that it must have been the witch Beatrice after all. I mean, there were so many things that couldn't have been done by humans. It only makes sense that it was the witch, like Maria had been saying all along. Maria is ecstatic that people are finally believing her, and now that she is in the Golden Land, she's never been happier. Everyone seems to be enjoying themselves, except for one person. This person was trying to tell everyone all along that there is no way a witch did this. Witches and magic aren't real. That person was Battler. He couldn't believe that everyone had given up so easily. Even though there were some unexplainable murders and things that happened, he is sure that there must have been some human explanation for them. The others are confused by this. They challenge him to explain some of these insane things that had happened with human means. Of course he can't, but that doesn't mean he wants to give up on thinking. But it's all useless. There must be something wrong with his head. After all, this tea party was organized by the witch herself. Everyone had suddenly gone respectfully silent, except for Battler. And then Battler heard a soft laugh behind him. And there she was, Beatrice, the Golden Witch. Beatrice tells Battler that she is taken with him and his willingness to deny her, even with all the evidence validating her existence. Battler tells her it's all useless. The witch in front of him must be an illusion. This just makes Beatrice laugh. I mean, she's here right now in front of him. What more could he want? She tells him he is the kind of man that she likes making kiss her toes. Amused that she is going to escape 1,000 years of boredom, she puts Battler's determination to the test. She waves her magic pipe and transports them to the location of the second twilight. With the chain set, this room is a closed room. How could you possibly kill the 2 that were in there? Battler says the culprit must have had some kind of device that they could use to shoot the sakes through the crack in the door. Of course, this is ridiculous, and Beatrice laughs in his fucking face. Then, Beatrice demonstrates how she would do it, making sure that Battler watches closely so he realizes just how fast she is going to make him kiss her toes. Then Battler seals his own fate by saying if she can convince him that she is real, he will not only kiss her toes, he will kiss her bare ass. Beatrice says she will remember that promise. Beatrice shakes her golden pipe once again. She summons the 7 stakes of purgatory and calls upon Beelzebub and Asmodeus. They ricochet all around the room at breakneck speeds and then plunge themselves into Eva and Hideyoshi's skulls. Battler wasn't allowed to see it since he was on the other side of the door, but there was no doubt that those 2 stakes killed the 2 in the guest room in the exact same manner as before. Satisfied with herself, she transports them back to the tea room, cackling along the way. Everyone was sitting meekly except for Battler, and Cannon started dripping blood from his mouth. Satan's stake was buried in a Cannon's chest once again. After gasping for air, he falls over dead. Battler is the only one that even acts upset. Everyone else just hangs their head looking at the floor. Battler doubles down in disbelief, saying that showing him that will not convince him of anything. Beatrice just laughs in amusement. She has decided she really likes Battler because of his conviction. Next was Shannon. Half of her face starts turning red and she doubles over in terrible pain. George starts crying, begging Battler to believe in Beatrice so his love Shannon can live and the magic can exist. But Battler was too stupid to do that. The half of her face that turned red explodes, killing her. The blood that sprayed from it even hit Battler in the face. Next, George, Jessica, and Maria all start turning red all over. Jessica, with her dying breath, begs Battler not to give up and please deny the witch to the very end. Then, the 3 of them turned into a pile of meat and blood, like they had completely melted and their bodies broke down. All that was left in the heap was a lower jaw and a rib cage. With a newfound rage, Battler turns to Beatrice. He tells her he will never forgive her no matter what now. He will deny her to the very end, no matter what she shows him. Everything that happens can be explained by humans, and he is going to erase her from this world. She happily replies, this is just the thing she needs to divert her 1,000 years of boredom, and forcing him to submit will truly be a satisfying endeavor. What are the answers to the questions posed in this game? How could you explain them with humans? She laughs hysterically as the curtain drops. In a mysterious, dimly lit smoking room, two witches are sipping tea. Beatrice offers her guests some more black tea and asks the witch for a suggestion. When she asks for some undistinguished dried plum tea, Beatrice scoffs. Lady Berncastel tells her that she doesn't have to display such hostility, to which Beatrice jokes that she would never be rude to a guest. The two discuss a time in the past where Berncastel defeated Lady Lambda Delta, the Witch of Certainty, in a game of attrition to crown herself as the most powerful witch in the world. Despite this, Berncastel says that she has no powers, and she certainly doesn't want to meddle with Beatrice's game with Battler. Berncastel says that her power is not compatible with Beatrice, since she is the Endless Witch. Beatrice's only goal is to extend this game for forever. Therefore, she cannot create a miracle that will end a game that is designed to last forever. Their powers are incompatible. Beatrice sees this statement as a sign of fake flattery from Bern. She denies that it is fake, saying that the flattery is just a payment for the cost of escaping boredom for a little while. She is just a traveler of fragments, and the only way that she can stay alive is to keep from succumbing to boredom. Nothing else matters. Beatrice promises that she will keep her entertained, and then leaves to prepare the next game board right away. As she leaves, Berncastel turns to the reader, and she says,
Something troublesome seems to have taken a liking to you. I'd really like to lend you my power, but that girl's power and mine have a very bad compatibility. But you really are pitiful, so I'll help you out just a bit. First of all, about that girl. She does have the name Beatrice, but that doesn't necessarily mean she is one individual woman. Get what I mean? In other words, she's not some human. Her existence is a personification of the rules of this world. To beat her, you have to expose the rules of this world and unravel them. Perhaps this can be likened to learning the rules of chess by watching a game. First, take a look at the chessboard. Then learn the movements and roles of the pieces. Then look for the conditions required to win at her game. When you've managed to reveal all these things, her heart will be exposed. After that, you can rip it apart or crush it as you please. I am being quite generous. In the past, when I had a human body, it took me 100 years to notice even this much. This is my meager farewell gift to you, the pitiful one captured by Beto. It is just like a spoon. A spoon can be used for more than just drinking soup. You can use it to dig through the prison you're locked in, or as a weapon to gouge the witch's eyes out. Of course, you can also use the spoon to continually sip the watery soup inside your eternal cell. Don't get the wrong idea. I have no intention of becoming your ally. I do feel empathy for you, but I won't help you. It's like I'm sitting in front of the television, yelling at you on the other side, even though my voice won't reach you. So you understand that I am a witch, right? I intend to enjoy this endless tale that Beto is going to weave until I tire of it. But that alone won't hold my interest. That's why I'll lend you my power. It's all so that I don't get tired of this. I am the cruelest witch in the world. Whoever the opponent may be, I'll make them surrender with certainty. Even if it's Beatrice, the endless witch. You are my game piece. Give it your best shot. I'll give you some advice sometimes out of her sight. Don't bore me, okay?